Chapter 888. In the Hungwan mountain range, Yuanda, go and fight. Seeing that Yu Haoran had taken out his natal sword and was ready to fight, the middle-aged man in green turned around and nodded to the young man holding his natal sword. Yes, Uncle Jean. The young man known as Yuanda acknowledged the order and slowly walked out with his natal saber in his hand. Yu Haoran, be careful. This person is very strong. Seeing that Yuanda's pace was gradually becoming one with his breathing, Thowling in his mind quickly reminded him. I know. Noticing that his opponent was in an unusual state of fighting, Yu Haoran put away his contempt and looked calmly at Yuanda, who continued to walk slowly. You don't think that you are the strongest among the younger generation just because you defeated the sealed Zishuan expert. Don't think that you are unparalleled just because you can create your own sword technique. Don't think that you are invincible just because you can defeat a quasi-martial venerable with a secret technique. When he was 5 meters away from Yu Haoran, Yuanda stopped and raised his head to look at Yu Haoran. His tone was full of arrogance as he lectured him. Next, I will let you know what a real martial technique is. I will let you know that the so-called self-created martial technique is just a joke. I will let you know that you're just a frog at the bottom of a well who looks up at the sky. The arrogance in Yuanda's tone made Yu Haoran feel as if he had returned to his previous life when he faced the Son of Heaven from the Yushi Temple. A sense of humiliation made his fighting spirit reach its peak. I look forward to seeing you do as you say. Raising the natal sword in his hand, Yu Haoran provoked with a disdainful tone. Autumn intent. Even at death's door, he was still so arrogant. Yu Haoran's contemptuous attitude instantly angered Yuanda, accompanied by Yuanda's soft shout. The saber chi formed by his natal sword, carrying the chill of the autumn wind, quickly slashed toward him. Early 4th grade martial king. Feeling that the saber chi with the autumn intent had reached the early 4th grade martial king, Yu Haoran was surprised and took a deep breath. Then he waved the sword in his hand and used the defensive sword technique that he had painstakingly cultivated in his previous life. Airtight. Accompanied by Yu Haoran's soft shout, the natal sword in his hand instantly turned into countless strong winds. While protecting his vital parts, it also constantly weakened the saber chi with the autumn intent. Yuanda was not surprised to see Yu Haoran successfully neutralize his saber technique with his defensive sword technique. Instead, a smug smile appeared on his face. Wind intent. Then, the natal sword in his hand, the natal sword chi, the natal saber sword in his hand. The will of autumn was even thicker, and the wind intent saber chi moved even faster. It instantly struck Yu Haoran's body, causing his impenetrable defensive sword technique to falter slightly. Stagnation meant that the opponent's attack power had increased to the point where the defensive sword technique could not withstand it. Yu Haoran had no choice but to take a step back and use the second defensive sword technique. Defend to the death. Accompanied by a soft shout, the countless strong winds that the sword had turned into were immediately replaced by a gust of wind. While continuing to protect his vital parts, it also directly weakened the saber chi with a stronger autumn intent. Sweeping intent. Yu Haoran's change of defensive sword technique successfully offset the saber chi with the wind intent. Similarly, Yuanda was not surprised at all. The natal sword slashed out a saber chi with a murderous aura from bottom to top. The sweeping saber chi was a killer move that specialized in attacking the lower body. It made the defense he had used just now somewhat passive. Yu Haoran had no choice but to continue to change the moves of his defensive sword technique. Impenetrable defense. Although the change of the defensive sword technique had successfully resolved the saber chi with the sweeping intent, Yu Haoran knew that it could not go on like this. Passive defense was not the way to get rid of the opponent, and it was also different from his combat habits. Therefore, after successfully blocking the saber chi with the sweeping intent, Yu Haoran decided to take the risk and change his attack method. Falling intent. The 3 consecutive saber chi that contained saber chi were easily resolved by Yu Haoran. Although Yuanda was not too surprised, the smug smile on his face had been replaced by seriousness. Then, he continued to use a more powerful saber technique. Not only did the falling intent saber technique contain more murderous intent, but its attack speed was also faster. In an instant, it broke through the impenetrable defense of the sword technique. Yu Haoran did not panic in the slightest. While constantly retreating, he continued to use the impenetrable defense of the sword technique to weaken the power of the falling intent saber chi. At the same time, he poured all his concentration into the natal sword. Sword pursuit. Autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves. Just as Yu Haoran used the method of constantly retreating to successfully block the power of the falling intense saber chi, the natal sword that had been infused with essence, chi, and spirit immediately turned into a bolt of lightning and shot directly at Yuanda. At the same time, Yuanda also used a saber technique that carried a strong chill and murderous intent. With an unstoppable momentum, he directly slashed at Yu Haoran. The saber technique that was superimposed with 5 martial techniques made the power of the saber technique that Yuanda used reach the early 6th grade of the martial emperor realm. The power of this saber technique attack had already exceeded the endurance of his defense. In the face of the fast saber chi, Yu Haoran's expression was very grave, but he did not panic at all. While using his mind to mobilize the Rui Bell that had merged with his soul to increase his defense, Yu Haoran immediately used the second sword technique that he had created when he was relaxing in Peach Blossom Town. Sword Heart. Seeing that Yu Haoran's self-created sword technique had reached the peak of the 5th grade of the martial emperor realm, Yuanda panicked slightly and immediately activated his high-grade martial emperor defensive magic weapon. Boom! Boom! As Jianzhu's sword technique and the saber technique of autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves landed on Yu Haoran and Yuanda respectively, 2 powerful roars suddenly came from a peak. Accompanied by the 2 powerful roars, Yu Haoran and Yuanda both spat out blood. The difference was that Yuanda only spat out 1 mouthful of blood, while Yu Haoran spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood in succession. Judging from the amount of blood he spat out, Yu Haoran was obviously at a disadvantage. However, the 4 quasi-martial venerables present had a look of admiration in their eyes. Only the middle-aged expert in green had a strong murderous intent in his eyes. Sword Heart. Ignoring the heavy injuries that his body had suffered just now, Yu Haoran continued to pour his essence, chi, and spirit into his natal sword. He also forcibly poured nearly 70% of his soul power into his natal magic weapon and directly used the second sword technique that he had created. As for Yuanda, although he had the protection of a high-grade martial emperor defensive magic weapon, the penetrating power of Jianzhu's sword technique had also seriously injured his internal organs. Chapter 889. Hengguan Mountain Range. Just as Yuanda brought the healing pill to his mouth and was about to swallow it, a sense of impending doom shrouded his heart in an instant. Seeing the natal sword coming at him at lightning speed, Yuanda, who had no time to defend himself, immediately shouted when he felt the power of the sword was at the middle stage of the 6th grade martial royal realm. "Uncle Gene, help me!" With a slight shake of his body, the middle-aged expert in green immediately appeared beside the natal sword. His lightning-fast palm technique directly knocked the natal sword away. Puff! The natal sword was connected to the user's mind. Therefore, when the natal sword was knocked away, Yu Haoran spat out 9 mouthfuls of blood. His ruddy face instantly turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Although his intrinsic sword had been sent flying, causing his mind to be severely injured, Yu Haoran's blood-stained face still revealed a cruel smile. Seeing the cruel smile on Yu Haoran's face, the expert in green immediately realized that something was wrong. However, when he was about to turn around to check, he suddenly heard Yuanda's dying scream behind him. Looking at Yuanda, who had fallen to the ground and died, although there was no wound on his body, as an expert of the martial venerable realm, the middle-aged expert in green immediately discovered that Yuanda's heart had been completely shattered. "Yu Haoran, you deserve to die." Turning around, the middle-aged expert in green roared with a cold face, his hair flying in the wind. "You're angry. As he reached out to wipe the remaining blood from the corner of his mouth, he directly took several top healing elixirs. Then, Howren, whose aura was weak, sneered and provoked him. At the same time, he immediately informed Thaling in his sea of consciousness to immediately perform the possession technique and take over his body at any time. Boy, do you know who Yuanda is? Faced with Howren's provocation, the middle-aged expert in green took a deep breath and then pointed to Yuan Da's body and asked, could it be the son of the heavenly palace of the Yushu Temple, or the heir of the family with the bloodline of the ancient divine beasts? Since the next battle with the middle-aged expert in green was left to Thaling, Howren, who gradually relaxed, could not help but tease him. Howren's teasing immediately disrupted the middle-aged expert in green's train of thought. He did not know how to emphasize Yuan Da's prominent identity. Taking a deep breath and forcefully suppressing the murderous intent in his heart, the middle-aged expert in green continued to introduce him. Yuan Da is the grandson of the second elder of the Shun family. After thinking about it carefully, Howren said with a blank expression, Shun family of the family. Howren's blank expression made the azure-robed middle-aged man feel as if his entire body was filled with strength, but there was a kind of depression that he had nowhere to vent. Is to you of the family? Two of the families, two of the family? How could he display the strength of the Chen clan? How could he highlight the importance of Yuan Da's identity? How could he make Howren feel extreme fear before he made a move to kill him? There had to be the most obvious comparison of the families. The Zhang family is very powerful, but in front of my Shun family, the Zhang family is like an ant. Whether they live or die depends on her mood. The middle-aged expert in green pointed to the beautiful young woman in white standing in front of the cave on the right. His tone was also filled with contempt. The Bai family is also a family with an inheritance. Isn't it powerful? But in front of my Shin family, they are as obedient as a lab rat. Their life and death are all in the hands of the Shun family's experts. Facing the middle-aged experts' slightly humiliating evaluation, both Old Man Zhang and the beautiful young woman in white showed a trace of dissatisfaction in their eyes. However, they did not dare to refute the example of humiliation he had just given. So what? Howren replied with an indifferent attitude. Brat, you killed a direct descendant of my Shun family. Not only do you have to pay with your life, even the Emperor Qin Kingdom's royal family behind you will be completely destroyed by my Shun family. The middle-aged expert in green threatened in an incomparably overbearing manner. Howren, the body possession technique has already been used. I can control your body at any time and instantly kill that guy. Just as the middle-aged expert in green finished his threat, Thaling's murderous reminder came from his mind. The battle of life and death between Howren and Yuanda was approved by the middle-aged expert in green. Whoever lost and died in the end had no one to blame but themselves. Not only did the middle-aged expert in green interfere in the battle of life and death between the two, but he also used the strength of a quasi-martial saint to directly injure Howren's mind. How could this not make Thaling angry? If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't reveal his tracks and avoid attracting the attention of certain existences, he would have already used Victor to directly blast him to death. He wouldn't have allowed him to jump around and brag about the Shun family that he had never heard of. So powerful. Thaling's murderous reminder and the middle-aged expert in green praising the Shun family made Howren, who had completely relaxed, couldn't help but have the thought of playing tricks on him. I don't know much about the Zhang family and the Bai family, but I know a little about the guardian families that have the bloodline of ancient divine beasts in the Yushu Temple of the Seven Top Sections. Howren's face revealed a look of admiration as he asked with yearning. Could it be that the Shun family is even more powerful than the guardian families? Faced with Howren's questioning, the middle-aged expert in green didn't want to lose face and answered yes. However, when he thought about the strength of the guardian families, he could only choose to remain silent. Since they are not as powerful as the guardian families, then they must be more powerful than the Yushu Temple. Yu Haoran guessed with a self-righteous expression. Not at all. As a second-grade guardian family, the Yushu Temple's foundation was almost at the level of the guardian families. Moreover, the Yushu Temple's way of doing things was incomparably tyrannical. They believed that those who followed them would prosper, and those who opposed them would perish. Therefore, when faced with Yu Haoran's comparison of the Shun family and the Yushu Temple, the middle-aged expert in green couldn't even remain silent. He could only gloomily answer truthfully. This, Yu Haoran, who had already known the middle-aged expert in green's answer, immediately changed his expression and humiliated him. Not even as powerful as the guardian families and the Yushu Temple. I really don't know what the Shun family that you were praising just now is. What kind of family is that? They even want to threaten me and destroy the great Emperor Qin Kingdom. I'm embarrassed by your boasting just now. If it were me, I'm afraid I would be so ashamed that I would piss myself and drown myself. Chapter 890. In the Hungwan Mountain Range. Brat, you're courting death. After being repeatedly humiliated by Yu Haoran, the middle-aged powerhouse in green could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. The power of the law, combined with his powerful soul power, quickly condensed into a giant palm and directly grabbed at Yu Haoran. And just as the azure-robed middle-aged man's massive palm, condensed from laws and soul force, reached out to grab Yu Haoran, the four powerhouses present suddenly felt Yu Haoran's aura change. If the aura that Yu Haoran had released just now was a youthful aura full of vitality, then he was now like an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. This change in aura caused the four powerhouses to reveal a trace of doubt on their faces. Looking up at the rapidly approaching giant palm, Yu Haoran raised his arm and stretched out his finger. There was no trace of emotion in his voice as he softly shouted, "Flourishing curtain," a special energy that could be seen with the naked eye, like the sun rising from the east, the sea turning into mulberry fields, and the time reversing, slowly destroyed the giant palm formed by the law and soul power. Oh no! Through the feeling of controlling the giant palm with his mind, the middle-aged powerhouse in green immediately felt a fatal danger. The powerhouse's instinct made him want to avoid the attack of the energy, but the aura of the law had locked onto him. He knew that no matter where he fled, he would not be able to shake off the pursuit of the special energy. Helpless, he could only mobilize all his strength to form an absolute defense in front of him. Even so, the fatal danger in his heart did not disappear. The middle-aged powerhouse in green could only immediately activate the superior sage stage defensive device. It was only then that he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Just as the middle-aged powerhouse in green completed the second layer of defense, the special energy formed by the law of the flourishing curtain attacked the energy shield of the absolute defense. Even the defense formed by the full strength of a quasi-martial honorable who had passed the body calamity had the same effect as the giant palm formed by the law and soul power when facing the attack of the flourishing curtain. It was easily destroyed bit by bit. 3 seconds, seeing that the absolute defense that he had formed with all his strength only lasted for 3 seconds. The middle-aged powerhouse in green knew that the superior sage stage defensive device would not be able to withstand the attack of the flourishing curtain. Therefore, he planned to escape immediately. Although it was impossible to escape the attack of law energy, it gave him some time to think about countermeasures. However, just as the green-robed middle-aged man was about to escape, Hualamu's attack speed increased by dozens of times. Just as the green-robed middle-aged man was about to activate his soul force, Hualamu's attack landed on his body. There was no pain, and his body wasn't decomposed. After the blue-clothed middle-aged powerhouse sensed that the energy of the laws of prosperity didn't harm him, he looked at Yu Haoran in confusion. When he saw the indifference in Yu Haoran's eyes that did not belong to a human being, he suddenly understood. But when he wanted to shout out the thought that flashed through his mind, the rapid loss of his vitality made him unable to say anything even though he kept opening his mouth. Old Man Zhang and the other three experts, as well as the juniors beside them, immediately revealed expressions of extreme fear when they saw the azure-clothed, middle-aged expert's black hair rapidly turning white and his round and vigorous skin rapidly shriveling and aging. Decomposing and evolving. The scars of time law that one had experienced in one's life was also very terrifying. But after all, one would die immediately and not suffer any pain. The flourishing curtains law would strip away one's vitality bit by bit. It could make one feel the continuous erosion of one's lifespan as one aged, and one could also feel the rapid weakening of one's vitality. And this feeling was the most terrifying process of death. Shun shun. In a short 3 seconds, the azure-clothed, middle-aged powerhouse had become a 100-year-old man with sparse white hair and shriveled skin. Through the dim eyes, the azure-clothed, middle-aged powerhouse wanted to threaten that the Shun family would take revenge for him. But the feeling of old and powerlessness made him hoarsely say the word Shin. Ignoring the azure-clothed, middle-aged powerhouse who was close to death, Yu Haoran's cold eyes directly looked at the two young men who had been scared out of their wits. Facing Yu Haoran's cold and emotionless gaze, the two young men were scared out of their wits and completely turned into two lifeless corpses. Closing his eyes, Yu Haoran, who had regained control of his physical body, immediately took out a large number of top elixirs and consumed them. Not only did he recover from the consumption of his spirit when he used his physical body to display the law in Thaling, but he also continued to repair his damaged mind. Forcibly turning his head, the azure-clothed, middle-aged powerhouse looked at the corpses of Yuanda and the other two. His dim and powerless eyes revealed a strong sense of regret. No fate, no enmity, and they were complete strangers. Why did he provoke Yu Haoran? Now, not only had he and the three juniors of his family with unlimited potential died in the Hengduan mountain range, but the few treasures in the secret realm that could help the ancestor awaken as soon as possible would probably fall into the hands of Yu Haoran and the other experts. Regret. The azure-clothed, middle-aged powerhouse, whose heart was filled with endless regret, finally closed his eyes, and the last trace of life in his body completely disappeared. Alas! Looking at the azure-clothed, middle-aged powerhouse who had completely died, Elder Zhang could not help but sigh. Then, he exchanged glances with the other three experts and finally stepped towards Yu Haoran. Master Yu, please continue to heal your wounds. I will give you a detailed introduction of the secret realm that is about to open. Thank you, Elder Zhang. After opening his eyes and thanking him, Yu Haoran continued to close his eyes. He seized the time to heal his wounds while listening to Elder Zhang's introduction of the secret realm. Master Yu, the mountain in front of us is called the Holy Horse Peak. It is said that there is a stage one divine beast, the Heavenly Horse. In a basin about 3,000 meters southeast of Tianma Peak, more than 20 martial monarchs and martial kings were desperately besieging a gale wolf that was at the peak of the 7th rank of the 5th rank. Although the storm wolf was known as the killer of the forest, the basin environment, which was full of rocks and 3 layers of experts besieging it, made it lose its advantage in speed. Gradually, some wounds appeared on its body. As more and more blood flowed out of its wounds, the storm wolf, who was desperately resisting the besieging, felt more and more tired. When an expert with a cultivation of level 8 martial royal realm was about to use a fist technique to hit its vital parts, the storm wolf knew that its life was in danger. But at this moment, the entire Hengduan mountain range suddenly shook violently. Chapter 891. Today's 5 chapters in the Hengduan Mountains. 2 dazzling rays of green and red light suddenly rose from the St. Horse Peak, immediately attracting the attention of more than 20 masters present. It also made the master with the highest cultivation temporarily forget to continue attacking the vital parts of the Gale Wolf. The Gale Wolf's intelligence was not inferior to that of an adult. Taking advantage of everyone's distraction, it immediately escaped from the encirclement and accelerated towards the dense forest 1,000 meters away. But just as it reached the edge of the forest, it turned its head and glanced at the people who had besieged it. After deeply imprinting their appearance and aura in its mind, the Gale Wolf directly rushed into the dense forest. Red represents fire, and green represents wood. Could the ancient rumor be true? The mysterious Qingyan secret realm is hidden in the Hungwan Mountains? The Gale Wolf's escape was certainly noticed by the 8th-level martial royal expert, but he did not pay attention to it. Because of the change on the St. Horse Peak, he suddenly thought of the rumor about the Hungwan Mountains. "Brother Hai, are we going?" Hearing the 8th-level martial royal expert's words, some of the masters present who had also heard of the Qingyan secret realm suddenly showed a surprised expression. Among them, a young man of 27 or 28 years old, who was at the peak of the 5th-level martial royal realm, asked excitedly, "Of course we're going." The young man called Brother Hai nodded in agreement and said excitedly, "It's said that the Qingyan secret realm has the enlightenment stone that can improve comprehension, the 9 tunes holy soul flower that can improve one's physique and enhance one's potential, the longevity fruit that can prolong one's life, and so on. If we can obtain these treasures in the secret realm, not to mention the martial sage realm, even the martial venerable realm is not just a dream for us. Brother Hai, what are we waiting for?" The treasures mentioned by Big Brother Hai had completely ignited the greed in everyone's hearts. Regardless of whether it was the youths who were only 9th-grade martial kings or the beautiful beauties, they all urged Big Brother Hai to set off immediately. "Let's go." Without any delay, Brother Hai called out and immediately led everyone straight to the St. Horse Peak. The violent shaking and the dazzling green and red lights, almost all the masters and masters who were adventuring in the Hungwan Mountains were alarmed. Those who knew about the rumor of the Green Flame secret realm in the Hungwan Mountains immediately used their most powerful means to speed up to the St. Horse Peak. Even those who did not know about the rumors of the Green Flame secret land were attracted by the green and red light and rushed to the St. Horse Mountain. It took almost half an hour for Yu Haoran to recover the soul power and origin energy that he had expended using Thaling's Law. As for his mind, it was not something that could be recovered in a short period of time. Therefore, when he felt the shaking of the mountain range, he immediately opened his eyes and stood up. Then, in a flash, he appeared beside the white-clothed young woman and the young girl. His expression was slightly excited as he looked at the green light that shot out from the cave. According to Elder Zhang, the secret realm that was about to open was called the Green Flame Secret Realm. It was divided into 2 regions, the Green region and the Fire region. The cave on the left that shot out red light led directly to the Fire domain. It was suitable for martial artists with fire-attributed and metal-attributed constitutions. As for the cave on the right, it led directly to the Azure region, which was suitable for wood, water, and earth attribute martial artists. "Master Yu, my surname is Bai, and my name is Li." Seeing Yu Haoran appear beside her, the beautiful young woman bowed and took the initiative to introduce herself. "Yu Haoran's sect greets Senior Bai Li. If someone respects me, I will return the favor tenfold." Facing the beautiful young woman who took the initiative to show her kindness, Yu Haoran greeted her courteously. "Master Yu, you are too polite. Just based on the fact that you have the means to kill Shun Ao Yuan easily, I dare not accept the title of senior." Facing Yu Haoran's junior etiquette, Bai Li immediately dodged and spoke politely with a slightly flustered tone. "It's just external strength. It can't be considered my true ability." Yu Haoran shook his head and modestly gestured. "Master Yu, putting aside the fact that you have the means to kill a quasi-martial venerable, just based on your achievements in alchemy and formations, I can't accept the title of senior either." Facing Yu Haoran's humble gesture, Bai Li still didn't dare accept Yu Haoran's junior etiquette. If they continued to act humble to each other, it would definitely be a waste of time. Thus, Yu Haoran shrugged and could only follow Bai Li's suggestion and treat each other as equals. Haoran greets Madame Bai Li. "Yu Haoran, can I ask you a question?" After Yu Haoran and Bai Li greeted each other, the beautiful young woman standing behind Bai Li asked with a strange look in her eyes. Seeing that her niece actually called Yu Haoran by his name, Bai Li immediately reprimanded her loudly. "Yu Ling, Master Yu is your senior. You should be more polite." After hearing Bai Li's reprimand, Yuling turned her head and stuck her tongue out at her. Then, she continued to stare at Yu Haoran. Madam Bai Li, there's no need to mind. We can treat each other as equals. Compared to Bai Li, who cared too much about status, Yu Haoran preferred Yuling's casual attitude. Hence, he wasn't angry when Yuling directly called him by his name. Instead, he asked with a smile on his face. What do you want to ask? How old are you this year? Seeing that Yu Haoran didn't mind her rude behavior, Yuling became bolder and quickly asked. 18 years old. Age didn't affect any secrets. There was nothing to hide, so Yu Haoran replied. SSS. Yu Haoran's honest answer immediately caused Bai Li, Yuling, and another quasi-martial honor who had chosen the cave on the right to suck in a breath of cold air. In Peach Blossom Town, although they had heard of Yu Haoran's experiences from the people of the great Emperor Qin Kingdom, they hadn't heard of his true age. Hence, everyone had mistakenly thought that he only looked young. His true age was definitely around 27 or 28 years old. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to achieve such stunning results. But the truth was, he was only 18 years old. At 18 years old, not only had his cultivation reached the peak of 8th grade Martial King, he also had the strength of a 4th grade Martial King. Moreover, his Pill Dao and formation skills had reached the peak of his own realm. Yu Haoran's current achievements had far surpassed the most outstanding genius of their inherited family. He had far surpassed the future successor of their inherited family. Yu Haoran, are you even human? When she heard that Yu Haoran was younger than her, Yuling immediately felt a strong sense of defeat. At the same time, she couldn't help but suspect his true origins. Chapter 892. In the Hengduan mountain range. Shut up, Yuling. Seeing her niece question Yu Haoran's background, Bai Li reprimanded her with a frosty expression. Yu Haoran, I'm sorry. After hearing Bai Li's reprimand, Yuling immediately realized that her earlier questioning was too rude and quickly apologized. Waving his hand, Yu Haoran smiled to indicate that he was fine. Then, he looked toward the cave where the green light was becoming more and more dazzling. With this, he ended his conversation with Yuling. After all, even a monstrous prodigy with the greatest potential in the guardian families could not guarantee that his cultivation and strength would increase rapidly while achieving stunning results in Pill Dao and formations. The reason why he was able to do this was largely due to the help of external forces. Seeing that Yu Haoran took the initiative to look away, Yuling knew that he did not want to explain how he could guarantee the secret of cultivating 3 elements at the same time. She could only obediently retreat behind Bai Li. After that, she kept looking at Yu Haoran and began to compare him with the monstrous prodigies she was familiar with. In the end, she realized that apart from surpassing Yu Haoran in looks and family background, the rest of the prodigies from the guardian families were all inferior in terms of potential, comprehension, tenacity, and decisiveness. Yuling, quickly extinguish the unrealistic thoughts in your heart. Bai Li, who had watched Yuling grow up, quickly noticed her abnormality. As someone who had experienced it before, she knew that Yu Haoran's various stunning performances had successfully attracted Yuling's intense interest. This kind of strong interest was a very dangerous signal for a young girl. Therefore, Bai Li immediately used her divine thought to be on guard against Yuling. Aunt Li Wai wasn't an outstanding, monstrous prodigy like Yu Haoran, the kind of prodigy that the guardian families had always hoped to recruit through marriage. But why did Aunt Li not allow her to like him? Yuling, there's no reason. I can only tell you that Yu Haoran is not suitable for you. The family will not allow the two of you to be together. Faced with Yuling's questioning, Bai Li did not explain the real reason. She only continued to use the reason of not being suitable and not being allowed to forcefully extinguish the flames of love that had just risen in her heart. However, Bai Li had forgotten one thing. She did not have any reason to suppress Yuling. Not only would it not make Yuling yield, it would also arouse the intense, rebellious emotions in her heart and cause her to make a choice in the end. Get lost. Just as Yu Haoran was observing the situation in the cave that was spewing out green light and discussing with the pagoda spirit what to do after entering the Green Flame secret land, he suddenly heard the Zheng clan's quasi-martial venerable reprimand. Yu Haoran turned his head and saw more than 20 martial emperors and martial kings. Not only had they landed on the peak of the St. Horse Peak, but they were also planning to approach the cave on the right side of the mountain. Yu Haoran immediately understood the reason behind the Zheng expert's shout. Qi, S's spirit, spiritual spirit. Honorable, S spiritual Qi, S's, these honorable, S's, S. While it's that, it says they use US's. However, he did not pay much attention to this. Instead, he continued his discussion with Thaling. The Holy Horse Mountain doesn't belong to your family. Why do you have to stop us from getting close? This opportunity was right in front of him, but he was stopped by a person whose cultivation he could not see through. A youth at the peak of the 3rd grade martial emperors was successfully aroused. A mere 3rd grade martial emperor's cultivation dared to question him, a quasi-martial honorable who had perfected the laws. The Honorable Zhang's honorables rebuke immediately snorted coldly. Soon after, the youth's life aura disappeared as blood flowed from his face. Boom! As his life aura disappeared, the youth fell heavily onto a hard rock. With just a snort, the youth at the peak of the 3rd grade martial emperor's spirit had been shattered. How powerful was this middle-aged man before them? Therefore, the youth's companions did not have any intention of taking revenge. Instead, they immediately retreated a few dozen meters and looked at the Honorable Zhang's in horror. I don't mind if you take revenge for him. Looking at the group of people who had retreated a few dozen meters in horror, the Honorable Zhang pointed at the youth's corpse and reminded them with a smile. Senior, please forgive us. Just now, we failed to recognize Mount Tai and offended you. Junior apologizes to you. Faced with the Honorable Zhang's reminder, Brother Hai, who was at the early stage of the 8th grade martial emperor, immediately apologized with a smile. Get lost. The Honorable Zhang's smile flashed a disdainful sneer, and then he reprimanded Brother Hai sternly. Senior, we'll leave now. We'll leave now. Faced with the Honorable's reprimand, Brother Hai did not dare to be angry at all. He continued to smile obsequiously and motioned for his companions to leave the peak quickly. No matter how precious the treasures in the Green Flame's secret realm were, they were not as important as their own lives. Therefore, under Brother Hai's signal, more than 20 martial emperors and martial kings hurriedly retreated. However, among them, there was a woman at the peak of the 5th grade martial emperor. Her appearance and figure were very ordinary. She stood there like an idiot. Ruyu, don't just stand there. Hurry up and leave. Seeing the woman standing there in a daze, Brother Hai quickly reminded her in a low voice. He was afraid of angering the Honorable Zhang. However, the woman who stood there in a daze did not hear Brother Hai's reminder at all. She just stared blankly at the young man in a sky-blue robe standing in front of the cave. Ruyu, if you want to die, fine. But don't get us involved. Seeing that the woman did not pay attention to him, Brother Hai immediately reprimanded her in a low voice. Haoran, is that you? Ignoring Brother Hai's reprimand, the woman's eyes were full of expectation. She softly called out to the blue-clothed young man in front of the cave. The familiar voice made Yu Haoran immediately stop talking with Thaling. Then, he slowly turned around. When he saw the woman who called his name, he could not help but frown. He had never seen her before. Haoran, it's really you. Looking at the blue-clothed young man who slowly turned around, the woman's face suddenly revealed a look of surprise. It was the person she had been thinking about day and night. Ruyu, you're he Ruyu. Although the woman in front of him had a strange figure and appearance, he could never forget the familiar voice and the unforgettable look in her eyes. Yu Haoran finally recognized that she was the Black Widow of Mount Xiangshan, he Ruyu, who had betrayed him. It seems that Sister Fangling did not lie to me. You have never forgotten me. With the help of a special secret treasure, not only did she change her original appearance and figure, but she also completely changed her aura. Chapter 893. Hunduan Mountain Range, Holy Horse Peak. Ruyu, why are you here? Yu Haoran asked curiously as he looked at Ruyu, whose figure, appearance, red hair, and aura had been completely changed by the secret treasure. Back then in front of the palace in Xianyang City, when he Ruyu left dejectedly, although Yu Haoran appeared to be cold, he had always been worried about her safety. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to ask Director Jiang to arrange for experts from the Imperial Guards to protect her secretly in front of the Qin Emperor and Prince of Lanling. Later on, when he had heard from the Imperial Guards that she was with the Prince of Lanling's sister-in-law, Shi Fangling, he had been relieved. After all, not only was Shi Fangling's cultivation high, but she also had a mysterious background. With her protection and care, he Ryu would be very safe. However, why would he Ryu, who was supposed to be in the Lanling city governor's mansion, suddenly appear in the dangerous Hengguan mountain range? Why would she be with a group of rogue cultivators? It was Sister Fangling who arranged for me to come. She said that there was an opportunity in the Hengguan mountain range that could allow me to be reborn. He Ryu, who was barely suppressing the excitement in her heart, thought of Shi Fangling's teachings on her temperament and answered obediently. Moreover, the secret treasure that can change my appearance and aura was also given to me by Sister Fangling. When did you enter the Hengguan mountain range? Yu Haoran asked when he heard that it was Shi Fangling's arrangement. 5 days ago, Sister Fangling personally sent me into the Hengguan mountain range. He Ryu answered truthfully. Senior Zhang, Senior Zhang, I would like to trouble the two of you with a matter. After hearing He Ryu's answer, Yu Haoran thought for a while, then cupped his fist and asked Elder Zhang and the other quasi-martial honorable with the surname Zhang. Master Yu, you're too polite. Please tell us what you need. Facing Yu Haoran's request, Elder Zhang's attitude was very gentle as he replied. Even Shun Ao Yuan, who came from the Shun family, could be easily killed. How could this expert surnamed Zhang, whose background and cultivation were far inferior to Shun Ao Yuan's, dare to act as a senior in front of Yu Haoran? In a moment, I'll have to trouble the two seniors to bring this friend of mine into the fire domain and take care of her for me, Yu Haoran requested as he pointed at He Ryu. Master Yu, taking care of the juniors is not a problem for me and Brother Zhang, but we don't know what kind of dangers are hidden in the green flame secret realm. Faced with Yu Haoran's request, the expert surnamed Zhang opened his mouth to agree, but the old man, surnamed Zhang, shook his head and stopped him. Furthermore, he told Yu Haoran the truth. Therefore, Brother Zhang and I can only promise to take care of her to the best of our ability. If we encounter a crisis that even Brother Zhang and I cannot deal with, then we can only choose to protect ourselves first. Senior Zhang, I understand. Not dissatisfied with Elder Zhang's reality, Yu Haoran nodded to express his understanding. At the same time, he used his mind to summon Black Bear in the pet space. Black Bear, how is your recovery now? Master, my soul power and demonic power have all been restored. My overdrawn bloodline has also recovered by 80%. Black Bear, who had just woken up from a deep sleep, quickly replied. Black Bear, I have something to tell you next. Black Bear's cultivation was at the beginning of the 4th rank 6 sacred realm. Even if his bloodline had only recovered by 80%, it did not affect his strength much except that he could not easily use the martial arts passed down by his ancestors. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to arrange for him to protect He Ryu. Master, don't worry. I will definitely protect Miss Ryu's safety. Black Bear knew about He Ryu's special relationship with Yu Haoran, so he quickly patted his chest and promised. Hey Xiong, protecting He Ryu's safety is only one aspect. There are also treasures in the fire domain of the Green Flame's secret domain that can improve your strength and restore your bloodline. Nodding his head, Yu Haoran said carefully. In fact, even without He Ryu, he would have let Black Bear secretly enter the Green Flame secret territory after it opened. After all, Black Bear had a fire attribute constitution. The special environment in the fire territory was very suitable for him to train. After arranging Black Bear, he looked up and explained to He Ryu. Ryu, because you have a fire attribute constitution, it is not suitable for you to follow me into the Green Flame secret territory. Therefore, I can only ask the two seniors to bring you into the fire territory of the secret territory. Haoran, I will listen to you. Although she did not want to be separated from Yu Haoran, she remembered what Shi Fangling had told her to be as docile and obedient as possible in front of him. That way, Yu Haoran, who valued relationships, would always remember her good points. Once this affection accumulated to a certain extent and burst out in an instant, he would eventually choose to forgive her and reconcile with her. Therefore, in the face of Yu Haoran's arrangement, Hiryu nodded meekly and walked toward the cave on the left. She then stood obediently behind the powerhouse with the surname Zhang. Ryu, no one knows the real situation in the secret territory. The two seniors have their own matters to attend to and can't always take care of you, so I have arranged for Black Bear to accompany you. Hiryu's obedient and sensible behavior made Yu Haoran slightly uncomfortable. However, he still couldn't help but remind her out of concern due to his complicated feelings. Then, he released Black Bear from his pet space and had it go to Hiryu's side. Black Bear, I haven't seen you for a few months, and your strength has improved so quickly. After spending some time with each other, Hiryu had a better understanding of Black Bear's situation. Although she couldn't see through Black Bear's current grade, his terrifying aura had increased by at least 100 times. She knew that Black Bear's strength had probably undergone an earth-shattering change. She couldn't help but sigh. It's all thanks to Master's careful nurturing and care. Black Bear replied with a silly smile. Ryu, we're good sisters. Can you discuss with that senior and let me enter the secret territory as well? Seeing that not only could Ryu successfully enter the secret territory, but she also had the protection of two powerhouses and a Black Bear, the group of people who had retreated to the edge of the peak felt very envious and jealous. One of them, a beautiful woman in red who thought she had a good relationship with Hiryu, couldn't help but make a request. Turning her head to look at the red-clothed beauty who had asked her for help, Hiryu's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain. She then turned back to continue asking Black Bear about Yu Haoran's experiences during this period. Hiryu, you bitch. Have you forgotten how you joined our team? Have you forgotten how many times we've saved your life? Chapter 894. Hungguan Mountain Range, Holy Horse Peak. Wang Ru, you still have the cheek to say that. Appearing docile and obedient in front of Yu Haoran was because Hiryu wanted to win back Yu Haoran's heart, so she pretended to be gentle. In fact, she was still the Black Widow who led the Echo Mountain Bandit group deep down. Didn't you let me join your group? Because I have an ordinary appearance and can highlight your beauty and attract Hai Liang's attention? Didn't you save my life several times because you used me as bait to attract the attention of those exotic beasts, making it convenient for you to launch sneak attacks? Facing Hiryu's counterattack, Wang Ru was at a loss for words. Ryu, what you said earlier was a little too much. Hearing Hiryu's ridicule, Hai Liang, who suddenly stood in front of Wang Ru, explained with a panicked expression. No matter what intentions we had in the beginning, it's all thanks to our care that you were able to survive in the Hungguan mountain range. Now, we don't ask for anything in return, but we hope you won't slander our good deeds. Hai Liang took the initiative to explain himself because he realized that Hiryu's ridicule had made the young man who was taking care of her gradually turn gloomy. Although he didn't know who that young man was, he knew that the young man's background wasn't ordinary from how the four experts he couldn't see through treated him respectfully. Moreover, he also had a Black Bear exotic beast whose grade he couldn't see through, but whose strength was far stronger than him. As such, Hai Liang was afraid that Hiryu's sarcasm would cause the young man to be dissatisfied and make a move on them in the end. Hai Liang, don't make yourself sound so sanctimonious. After hearing Hai Liang's explanation, Hiryu also mocked him mercilessly. 6 times I was in danger, and you took the initiative to save me the last 4 times. The real reason you did that wasn't because you were willing to help others, but because you discover my secret. I think that if you enter the depths of the Hungguan mountain range, you'll definitely rely on your strength that far surpasses mine to peek at my secret. No, how could I do that? Seeing Hiryu directly exposing his hidden sinister intentions, Hai Liang's expression changed, and he quickly shook his head to deny it. Black Bear, kill him. Although Hiryu had betrayed him emotionally and almost caused him to close the door of love, as his first love after his rebirth, She was also the woman he had truly fallen in love with. Yu Haoran could tolerate Yu choosing to choose her again, but he couldn't tolerate someone trying to humiliate her through forceful possession. Therefore, the raging Yu Haoran directly roared at the black bear. Boom! Yu Haoran did not specify whether he was going to kill Wang Ru or Hai Liang. However, in order to complete the mission smoothly, Black Bear directly slapped Wang Ru and Hai Liang into meat patties. Seeing that Yu Haoran didn't allow Hai Liang and Wang Ru to argue and ordered Black Bear to kill them, the remaining 20 people immediately turned around and left the St. Horse Peak. They gave up on the opportunity to enter the secret realm and headed straight for the exit of the mountain range. Unfortunately, just as they left the St. Horse Peak, the Gale Wolf that they had besieged previously led 6 Gale Wolves of the same level and quietly followed them. After killing Wang Ru and Hai Liang, Yu Haoran turned around and continued to stare at the cave that was emitting green light. Seeing that Yu Haoran stood up for her, a sweet smile flashed across Ryu's eyes. She was even more convinced of Shi Fangling's plan and decided that she must be docile and obedient in front of Yu Haoran. However, Yu Ling, who was standing behind Bai Li, was puzzled. She couldn't understand why Yu Haoran would take such good care of a woman with an ordinary appearance and figure. Could it be that Yu Haoran doesn't like beautiful women and likes ugly women instead? However, it was said that Princess Ling Fei, who was engaged to him, was the most beautiful woman in the Tianxian continent. Yu Haoran, according to the expert with the surname Zhang, and the speed at which the green light is emitting from the cave, the Green Flame's secret realm will open soon. Just as the green light emitting from the cave started to weaken, the Thaling in Lin Huang's consciousness suddenly reminded him. When the time comes, use the rich and pure spiritual energy to raise your cultivation to the peak of 9th grade Martial King. I'm sure that through the training in the secret realm, you'll be able to completely consolidate your cultivation after breaking through. Then, use the Spirit Peach of Immortality to try and enter the realm of 10th grade Martial King and break through to the realm of Martial King within a month. Got it. After replying to the Thaling, Yu Haoran took a deep breath and silently circulated the Great Mystery Heart Sutra. At the same time, he used his divine sense to remind Ryu and He Xiong to make preparations to use the pure spiritual energy to raise their cultivation. As the green light emitting from the cave became dimmer and dimmer, Bai Li and the expert with the surname Zhang also subconsciously moved closer to the cave so that they could absorb the pure spiritual energy emitted from the cave at the first possible moment. Perhaps it was because Yu Haoran had killed Shinao Yuan, or perhaps it was out of respect for Yu Haoran, but Bai Li and the expert with the surname Zhang consciously kept a distance of 5 meters from him. As for the experts who had rushed to the St. Horse Mountain with all their might, but could only observe from afar due to the deterrence of the expert with the surname Zhang, they also discovered the secret of the green and red lights. They immediately circulated their soul power and Yuan Qi, fighting to enter the secret as quickly as possible. It's here. The divine sense of a peak 9th grade Martial Saint allowed the Thaling to discover the changes in the cave at the first moment and immediately warned him. He immediately sat down cross-legged and circulated the Great Mystery Heart Sutra with all his might. Yu Haoran's unexpected action of sitting cross-legged immediately alerted Bai Li and the expert with the surname Zhang. They each instructed their juniors to use the same method of meditation to increase the speed at which they absorbed the pure spiritual energy. However, for them who had reached the realm of Martial Saint, the pure spiritual energy could only increase their strength by a portion at most, but could not directly break through their cultivation. Therefore, it was the same for them no matter what kind of posture they used to absorb the spiritual energy. PFFF. Just as Yu Ling and the other 2 young experts sat down cross-legged and did not have time to circulate their Heart Sutra, the green light quickly disappeared from the cave and was immediately shot out countless amounts of close to liquid spiritual energy. The purity of the spiritual energy was not inferior to a 4th grade spirit stone. Chapter 895, Hunguan Mountain Range, top of the St. Horse Peak. Yu Haoran, the pure spiritual qi in the cave is too dense. The spiritual qi within 20 meters of the cave entrance is already 30 times the normal spiritual pressure. Just as Yu Haoran was using the pure spiritual qi to quickly increase his cultivation, Thaling's voice suddenly came from his sea of consciousness. Under such circumstances, the two quasi-martial honorables can't use their divine sense at all. So, you can directly use the secret devouring technique and see if you can use the spiritual qi to push your cultivation and physical body to the complete 10th stage. Okay, without any hesitation, Yu Haoran continued to use the Great Mystery Sutra while using the secret devouring technique. Then, the amount and speed of absorbing spiritual qi increased by more than 10 times. Even under such circumstances, the spiritual pressure within 20 meters of the cave entrance did not decrease at all in the face of the pure spiritual qi in the cave. With the help of the Great Mystery Sutra and the secret devouring technique, the bottleneck of the peak of the 8th stage Martial King realm did not last long. The huge amount of pure spiritual qi directly broke through, allowing his cultivation to smoothly enter the early 9th stage Martial King realm. Then, he continued to absorb and devour the pure spiritual qi, continuing to increase his cultivation and physical body grade. Without the restriction of space, the pure spiritual qi from the cave soon began to spread to the area outside the St. Horse Peak. This caused some of the experts hiding around the St. Horse Peak to go crazy. If they could absorb such pure and dense spiritual qi in large amounts, they would definitely be able to break through their cultivation. Therefore, some of the martial sages and warriors who were successfully tempted immediately took the risk and entered the St. Horse Peak. Then, they gradually approached the cave where the pure spiritual qi was denser. 30 meters is the perimeter. Sensing that someone had forcefully entered the St. Horse Peak, the Zheng warrior wanted to immediately kill them. However, when he saw that there were more than a few hundred martial sages and martial emperors on the peak, he could only take a step back and request, "If you exceed 30 meters, don't blame me for being merciless." In response, the martial sages and martial emperors did not have the patience to continue challenging the Zheng warrior. They all chose a suitable position and began to absorb the pure spiritual qi crazily. As more and more powerhouses and experts entered the St. Horse Peak and began to crazily absorb the pure spirit qi, the spirit qi that was originally able to continuously spread out was eventually limited to the entire St. Horse Peak. With the dual assistance of the Great Mysterious Heart Sutra and the secret devouring technique, the cultivation of the rank 9 Martial King that Xu Feng had just broken through continued to rapidly increase. In 3 minutes, his cultivation had broken through to the middle stage of 9th grade Martial King. In 5 minutes, his cultivation had broken through to the peak of 9th grade Martial King. 10 minutes later, he successfully advanced to the peak of 9th grade Martial King. However, compared to the rapid improvement of his cultivation, his physical body, which had also absorbed a large amount of pure spiritual energy, showed no signs of advancing. Yu Haoran did not care about this. This was because he knew very well that as his realm continued to increase, the amount of energy he needed to break through would also increase. With the 30 times pure spiritual qi in front of him, it would take at least 1 to 2 hours for him to reach the rank of a complete 10th grade Martial King. However, it was obvious that the volume and speed of the spirit qi ejecting from the caves had begun to decrease. It was simply impossible for his physical body to reach the rank of a complete 10th grade Martial King. Therefore, while there was still a large amount of pure spirit qi in the surroundings, Yu Haoran continued to use the Great Mysterious Heart Sutra and the secret devouring technique to increase his cultivation of the peak of 9th grade Martial King to the limit. This was so that when he finished his training in the secret realm, he could use the peaches of immortality to break through to the rank of a complete 10th grade Martial King. As more and more powerhouses and experts entered the St. Horse Peak, The pure spirit chi ejecting from the two caves was being consumed faster and faster. When he felt the spiritual pressure of the pure spirit chi drop to 10 times, Yu Haoran stopped using the secret devouring technique. When the spiritual pressure of the pure spirit chi dropped to 5 times, he simply ended his cultivation and stood up to take out his natal sword. No! At the moment when the pure spirit chi completely disappeared, a peak 8th grade martial king about 80 meters away from the cave on the peak suddenly howled in annoyance. Just a little bit more, and I can successfully break through to the peak of 9th grade martial king. However, when he noticed that thousands of people were looking at him, the peak 8th grade martial king immediately lowered his head, afraid that he would attract the attention of some of the powerhouses present. Master Yu, how's your harvest? Looking at Yu Haoran, who was holding his natal sword tightly and was ready to break into the secret realm at any time, the expert surnamed Zheng asked with a smile. The effect is very. Turning his head to nod at the expert surnamed Zheng, Yu Haoran was about to exclaim about the heaven-defying effect of the secret realm ejecting pure spirit chi when an extremely strong suction force suddenly came from the cave where the spirit chi stopped. It was too late to resist, and it was impossible to resist. The strong suction force directly sucked Yu Haoran, who had not finished speaking, into the cave. What's going on? Looking at Yu Haoran, who was being sucked into the cave, the expert surnamed Zheng looked at Bai Li with a puzzled expression, because this was completely different from what they knew about entering the Green Flame secret realm. Brother Zheng, just as the expert surnamed Zheng and Bai Li did not understand why Yu Haoran was being sucked into the cave, the old man surnamed Zheng, who was closest to the cave on the left, was also being sucked into the cave by the strong suction force. The expert surnamed Zheng could not help but cry out. Looking at the cave on the left, and then at the cave in front of her, Yuling suddenly thought of the breathing of the horse-type exotic beasts her family reared. She immediately used her divine sense to call out to Bai Li. Aunt Li, quick, go to where Yu Haoran was standing just now. Although she did not understand why her niece was doing this, she knew that with her outstanding intelligence, she must have discovered the secret of how Yu Haoran and the old man surnamed Zhang were being sucked into the cave. She immediately grabbed Yuling's shoulder and appeared where Yu Haoran was standing in a flash. Just as she stopped, a strong suction force directly sucked Bai Li and Yuling into the cave. Bai Li and Yuling's actions earlier, as well as the final outcome, made the experts surnamed Zheng and Zheng realize the importance of their position. Directly grabbing the shoulders of the two juniors, the expert surnamed Zheng appeared where Yu Haoran had been standing in a flash. Then, he was sucked into the cave by the suction force. As for the expert surnamed Zheng, he first got He Xiong to bring He Ruyu into the cave from where the old man, surnamed Zhang, had been standing. Only then did he bring one of his juniors into the cave through the suction force. I understand now. Seeing Yu Haoran and the others disappear before the cave, one of the martial saints who knew more about the Green Flame secret realm suddenly called out loudly. Chapter 896. Hengguan Mountain Range, St. Horse Peak. Just as the martial sage finished introducing the Green Flame secret realm, 7 figures appeared in front of the caves on both sides at a speed 10 times faster than the peak 9th level martial sages. Unfortunately, the strong suction force that allowed them to enter the inner area of the secret realm had disappeared. The 7 quasi-martial venerables who were hiding their cultivation could not help but roar to the sky. Roar! Just as the 7 quasi-martial venerables' roars disappeared, a roar of a strange beast that was as powerful as the quasi-martial venerables' roars sounded in the Hengguan mountain range. Before the roar ended, a second, third, fourth, and fifth roar sounded. A total of 14 strange beasts' roars sounded. Along with the 14 strange beasts' roars, the crowd was shocked to find that countless strange beasts that lived in the Hengduan mountain range were rushing towards the St. Horse Peak crazily. Most of them were powerful 5th-rank martial emperors and 4th-rank sacred beasts. It's over. Seeing the countless exotic beasts rushing over at high speed, the eyes of the people on the mountain peak immediately revealed looks of despair. The 7 quasi-martial venerables looked at each other and were about to join forces to break out of the encirclement. Suddenly, 2 rays of green and red light shot out from the cave behind them. However, this time, the 2 rays of green and red light did not shoot up to the sky. Instead, they condensed into 2 green and red doors 10 meters away from the cave entrance. Quick, enter the secret realm through the doors. Seeing the 2 rays of green and red light shooting out from the cave and condensing into 2 colored doors, the martial sage who introduced the green flame secret realm immediately reminded them loudly. Without any hesitation, the 7 quasi-martial venerables took the lead to enter the green and red doors, followed by the peak 9th level martial sages. When the countless strange beasts of the Hungduan mountain range rushed to the peak of the St. Horse Peak, the last peak 9th grade martial ancestor realm expert waved his life sword at the strange beasts that were rushing to the peak. Then, he turned around and entered the secret realm. Seeing that thousands of human warriors had gathered at the peak of the St. Horse Peak and had all entered the secret realm, the peak 4th rank sacred beasts that rushed to the peak immediately roared and wanted to rush into the secret realm. Roar! However, right at that moment, a roar resounded through the clouds, causing the exotic beasts to immediately calm down. Furthermore, they obediently crawled on the ground. Boom! As a gigantic large power King Kong ape with a height of 80 meters heavily smashed onto the St. Horse Peak, the entire St. Horse Peak immediately shook violently. Are you guys going? After stabilizing its body, the 80-meter-tall large power king Kong ape shouted towards the depths of the Hungduan mountain range. Old Gene, I'll go. Just as the question was asked, a raging flame lion that was as big as a mountain and covered in red fur instantly appeared beside the large power king Kong ape. Who else? The large power king Kong ape continued to ask. The secret realm contains the bloodline left behind by my black dragon ancestor. Old Black must go. Accompanied by the voice of someone who called himself Old Black, a giant black python that was 1,000 meters long slithered over from the depths of the Hungduan Mountains. Wherever the black python passed, trees were broken and rocks were shattered. It was a complete mess. Looking at the black python that was climbing up the St. Horse Peak, the hundreds of exotic beasts that were blocking its path hurriedly dodged with all their might. However, the black python was not grateful at all. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed all the hundreds of exotic beasts that were blocking its path. Who else? Ignoring the black python's actions of swallowing the exotic beasts, the large power king Kong ape continued to shout towards the depths of the Hungduan mountain range. However, after waiting for more than a minute, there was no response from the depths of the Hungduan mountain range. Let's go. Twisting his body, he signaled to the raging flame lion and the black python. The large power king Kong ape took the lead and passed through the red door, entering the fire domain of the green flame secret realm. Can you do it yourself? Looking at the black python, the raging flame lion asked worriedly. Brother Hua, don't worry. After Old Black enters the wood domain of the secret realm, he will first look for his own kind that contains the bloodline of his ancestor. He will strive to raise the purity of his bloodline to 30%, and after trying to pass through the body tribulation, he will then look for trouble with those quasi-martial realm experts. Facing the raging flame lion's concern, the black python confidently introduced it. All right, then be careful. The raging flame lion nodded and then directly entered the fire domain through the fire door. As for the black python, it moved its huge body and directly entered the green door. After the 3 terrifying exotic beasts entered the secret realm, the tens of thousands of exotic beasts that had gathered at the peak entered the green domain and the fire domain according to their respective physiques. Yu Haoran, who was forcefully sucked into the secret realm by the strong suction force formed by the cave entrance, immediately opened his eyes when he felt something hard under his feet. Then he was completely stunned by the scene in front of him, because the environment in front of him was very similar to the primeval forest under the cliff in the depths of the mountain range where the 100 Chi Gate was located. If there was anything different, it would be that the things in front of him were several times larger than the primeval forest, or even dozens of times larger. An ordinary blade of grass was nearly 3 meters tall, not to mention the ancient trees that towered into the sky. There were thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of meters tall. Fouling, have I returned to the ancient times? Hugh Howard couldn't help but swallow his saliva when he saw an ordinary rabbit that was nearly 6 or 7 meters tall jump out of the grass. His voice was a little weak as he asked, "To be honest, I don't know either." Fouling shook his head and replied to Hugh Howard's question while spreading out his divine sense. When he wanted to carefully examine the situation in this space, he unexpectedly found that his divine sense couldn't leave Hugh Howard's sea of consciousness at all. This made his expression change, and he reminded him, "Hugh Howard, the rules of this space are very strong. My divine sense can't leave your sea of consciousness at all." After hearing Fouling's reminder, Hugh Howard hurriedly mobilized his divine sense and found that his divine sense couldn't leave his sea of consciousness either. "Restricting my divine sense. Don't tell me it restricts my cultivation." A frightening thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Without the slightest hesitation, Hugh Howard immediately mobilized the soul power in his sea of consciousness and then directly rose into the sky. Fortunately, this space only restricted his divine sense and not his cultivation. This made him couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. However, without the help of Fouling's divine sense, which direction should he go next? Screech! Just when Hugh Howard didn't know which direction he should go next, suddenly there was an earth-shattering screech from the depths of the forest. Accompanied by the screech, Hugh Howard hurriedly looked up and found a giant eagle with a wingspan of over 100 meters, like a meteor rushing directly toward the rabbit that just jumped out of the grass. Looking at the giant eagle that accurately caught the rabbit and quickly rose into the sky, Hugh Howard frowned and asked, "Fouling, I don't know if you've noticed a strange phenomenon." Chapter 897. In the Green Flame Secret Realm, Hugh Howard took out a fragrant elixir from his storage ring that could directly increase one's cultivation. He waved it at the giant eagle in the sky. In just 3 seconds, the giant eagle, which seemed to blot out the sun, rushed directly towards him. Or to be more precise, it rushed directly towards the elixir in his hand. When the giant eagle was 30 meters away from him, Hugh Howard threw the elixir in his hand towards the giant eagle. Then, he directly rose into the air and stood firmly on the giant eagle's back. Perhaps it was because it had eaten the delicious elixir that Hugh Howard had just given it, but the giant eagle had a good impression of him. Therefore, in the face of Hugh Howard, who suddenly stood on its back, the giant eagle did not struggle desperately. Instead, it flapped its wings quickly and flew directly into the depths of the forest with him. Seeing that the giant eagle did not mind him sitting on it, Hugh Howard took out 2 more elixirs and fed them to it. After that, he bent his knees and sat cross-legged on the giant eagle's back. While observing the environment of the forest below, he told Fouling about his discovery just now. "Fouling, even though the living creatures in this space are relatively large in size, with the size of the giant eagle and the giant rabbit, as well as the density of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in this space, they could at least enter the ranks of exotic beasts or demonic beasts. But in the end, through Hugh Howard's hand on the giant eagle's back, Fouling's divine thought smoothly entered the giant eagle's body, and then he carefully checked it again. Then he was surprised to find that there was not even a trace of demonic power in the giant eagle's body. Hugh Howard, give me some time to think about it." The environment in front of him was similar to that of ancient times, and the giant eagle, which was almost 100 meters in size, was just an ordinary bird. Fouling vaguely felt a sense of familiarity. However, this feeling was brought about by the integration of the memory of the previous weapon spirit. The impression was not so deep, and he needed to think carefully before he could really recall it. Therefore, after reminding him, Fouling closed his eyes and began to think carefully. "All right, think about it then." Hugh Howard nodded and stood up. He looked at the roots of a giant tree with a diameter of more than 10,000 meters in front of him with a shocked expression. Yet, it had been forcefully broken. Screech! Seeing the giant roots below, the giant eagle let out a cry, then flapped its wings and quickly landed on the roots. Not good. Just as the giant eagle landed on the tree root, a suction force directly sucked away the medicinal efficacy of the 2 pills it had just swallowed. After that, the suction force discovered that Yu Haoran, who was standing on the giant eagle's back, contained an even greater amount of energy. An even stronger suction force directly froze Yu Haoran, who was about to take flight, in place, and then began to forcefully extract the yuan energy in his dantian. Fouling, think of something. Feeling the yuan energy in his dantian being rapidly extracted by the powerful suction force formed by the tree root, Yu Haoran's expression changed abruptly, and he immediately went to Fouling Sade. Yu Haoran, quickly enter the victor with your soul. Fouling opened his eyes and saw the tree root extracting the yuan energy in Yu Haoran's dantian. His voice trembled as he reminded Yu Haoran. Without the slightest hesitation, his consciousness controlled his soul to enter the victor, and then his consciousness returned to his physical body. Fouling, who only had a soul, did not dare to stay in Yu Haoran's sea of consciousness any longer, and also instantly entered the victor. Just as his soul entered the victor, the suction force, which had already sucked away all the yuan energy in his dantian, quickly entered his sea of consciousness through his meridians. However, after discovering that there was no energy in his sea of consciousness, the suction force formed by the tree root withdrew from his sea of consciousness and dantian, and also removed the lock on Yu Haoran. It's over. The powerful suction force formed by the tree root not only directly sucked away all the yuan energy in his dantian, but also completely destroyed his dantian, which had been condensed by yuan energy. This completely destroyed the perfect dantian that he had painstakingly developed. Yu Haoran fell directly onto the back of the giant eagle. His face was gloomy, and a deep sense of despair emerged in his heart. The injury to his dantian, this time, was different from the injury caused by the backlash of using the secret transformation technique, and it was also different from the injury caused by the backlash of using the curtain of prosperity. This was because the damage caused by the backlash of the secret technique and the power of law was only the damage to the Dantian's foundation and could be repaired and recovered using elixirs. However, the damage caused by the tree root suction force had directly destroyed the structure of the Dantian and completely destroyed its existence. It was an injury that could not be healed at all. Fouling, more than a year's worth of hard work has now been completely destroyed. Yu Haoran lamented to Fouling, who was hiding in the victor, after re-examining his dantian with his consciousness and confirming that his dantian had truly disappeared. Yu Haoran, don't be discouraged. Perhaps there is still a chance for things to turn around. Fouling hurriedly comforted Yu Haoran when he felt the despair in his heart. In the face of Fouling's comforting words, Yu Haoran only shook his head with a bitter smile and did not say much. As if sensing Yu Haoran's depressed mood, the giant eagle turned its head and used its sharp, hard beak to touch his arm. Yu Haoran raised his head to look at the giant eagle, and a trace of cold light flashed in his eyes. He had kindly given him the elixir, but in the end, it had resulted in his foundation being destroyed and his cultivation being crippled. If it were not for the fact that his soul was hiding in the victor and his dantian had been destroyed, and he could not mobilize the slightest bit of power, he would have thought of directly killing the giant eagle. Taking a deep breath, Yu Haoran lowered his head to hide the strong, murderous intent in his eyes that he could not suppress. Seeing that Yu Haoran had lowered his head and was ignoring him, the giant eagle touched his arm with its sharp beak again. "Beast, you've caused me." Yu Haoran, who had been repeatedly disturbed by the giant eagle, finally could not control the anger in his heart. As he shouted loudly, he was suddenly interrupted by 2 gray fruits condensed from the tree root in front of him. "Brother Eagle, what kind of fruit is this?" Howard quickly asked when he vaguely felt that the gray fruits condensed from the tree root in front of him might have a chance for his injury to turn around. However, when he saw the bewildered look on the giant eagle's face, he suddenly remembered that it was just an ordinary beast. How could it understand his words? Howard, this is the witchcraft fruit that can be used to improve the quality of the physical body. Thawing, who had been checking the memories of the previous weapon spirit, suddenly had a special feeling in his heart, and this feeling made him subconsciously look up. When he saw the two gray fruits condensed from the tree root, a light flashed in his mind. Not only did he recognize the origin of the gray fruits, but he also instantly knew the true origin of this space. Thawing, what is the witchcraft fruit, and what is its use? Chapter 898. In the Green Flame Secret Realm. The two wizard vitality fruits were condensed from broken tree roots with a diameter of more than 10,000 meters. They were different in color and size. One of them was light gray and the size of a cherry, while the other was dark gray and the size of a baby's fist. After seeing Howard notice the wizard vitality fruit condensed from the tree roots, the giant eagle chirped happily. It then stretched out its sharp beak and directly swallowed the cherry-sized wizard vitality fruit. Later, Howard was shocked to find that the giant eagle, which had swallowed the wizard vitality fruit, reached a height of nearly 100 meters and soon exceeded 100 meters. Howard, in fact, the wizard vitality fruit is not a spiritual fruit. It is the essence condensed from a special law. As the tower spirit watched the huge eagle eat the witchcraft essence fruit, its body quickly grew to over 100 meters in size. Then, it sorted out the information about the witchcraft essence fruit and told Howard the details. The essence condensed from the law. Thawing's explanation about the wizard vitality fruit just now made Howard even more confused. Alas, with a sigh, Thawing looked through Victor and the sea of consciousness at the tree roots completely surrounded by towering ancient trees, and said in a somewhat complicated tone, Howard, when the world was first created, the chaos bred countless creatures. The most powerful creatures were the ancient divine beasts that ruled the ancient times for hundreds of millions of years. Seeing that Thawing was about to reveal ancient secrets that he did not know, Howard quickly patted the excited giant eagle and motioned for it to be quiet for a while. Then, he carefully listened to Thawing's story about ancient secrets. However, at that time, there was a kind of creature that was far more powerful than the ancient divine beasts. However, the number of this kind was so small that it had been completely suppressed by the ancient divine beasts, resulting in its lack of reputation. At this point, Thawing's gaze fell on the broken tree roots where the giant eagle was crouching, and he said with a lonely expression, this race was the wizard ancestor, who specialized in physical cultivation and was famous for their huge bodies. Wizard ancestor. He carefully recalled his memories of exploring various ruins and forbidden areas in his previous life, looking for information about the ancestral witch. Thawing, the ancestral sorcerer you mentioned just now, is he from the giant tribe? Specializing in the cultivation of the physical body, his body was huge. Combined with the description given by Thawing just now, Howard finally remembered that when he had just broken through to the peak of the third-grade martial royal realm, he had followed the empty spirit mouse into a dense forest at the border of the southern region and the eastern region. He had entered a secret realm with an environment similar to the primeval forest in front of him, but the creatures there were slightly smaller. He had seen the information about the giant tribe. No, however, Thawing immediately shook his head in denial. Although the giant race was born at the beginning of the world, they were the weakest race. They were food for the ancient divine beasts to enjoy and slaves to enslave. The ancestral sorcerer is a powerful creature that feeds on ancient mythological beasts. The giant tribe is not even qualified to carry their shoes. Thawing, such a powerful creature, why is there no record of them in this world? In his previous life, perhaps his cultivation was not high, but in terms of knowledge and experience, He was afraid that even a martial venerable who had lived for more than 5,000 years was not as good as him. After all, the void spirit mouse, which could ignore the obstruction of any formation and taboo, and could search for all the treasures in the world, had taken him into too many ruins and forbidden areas of different periods, and had witnessed too many secrets that were unknown to others. However, no matter what period the ruins and forbidden areas were, there was no trace of the ancestral sorcerer at all. How could this not make you, Howard, feel strange? There are two reasons. Glancing at the wizard origin fruit condensed from the roots. Thowling motioned you, Howard, to eat the wizard origin fruit first, in order to prevent it from being stolen by a beast that might appear, and then continue to introduce. The first reason is the quantity I just mentioned. Because the ancestral sorcerer specialized in the cultivation of the physical body, their physical bodies were too strong, so it affected their breeding of offspring. The stronger the physical body, the harder it is to breed offspring, and the fewer the number. The second reason is that they were too powerful, so powerful that they could devour and enslave ancient mythological beasts, and finally cause panic among the 9 ancient mythological beast kings. In order to ensure the dominance of the ancient mythological beasts, the 9 ancient mythological beast kings consciously used assassination to further reduce the number of the ancestral sorcerer. When the number of the ancestral sorcerer was less than 1,000, the 9 ancient mythological beast kings led tens of thousands of mythological beasts in the martial god realm and carried out an extermination operation against the ancestral sorcerer. At this point, Thowling looked at you, Howard, and asked, "You, Howard, do you know what the final result was?" Of course, the 9 ancient mythological beast kings won, and the ancestral sorcerer was completely exterminated. You, Howard, replied without thinking. "You're wrong." Thowling shook his head and gave a result that shocked you, Howard. The final result was that they perished together. The ancestral sorcerer, with less than 1,000 people, not only killed tens of thousands of mythological beasts in the martial god realm, but the 12 most powerful ancestral sorcerer even used their own formation to exhaust the 9 ancient mythological beast kings to death. The 9 ancient mythological beast kings that came later were just descendants who inherited the bloodline of their ancestors. They became kings through their own cultivation, but they didn't have the chaotic spiritual light that their ancestors passed down, so they couldn't reach the strength of their ancestors. No way. With less than 1,000 people, they could directly kill the 9 ancient mythological beast kings and tens of thousands of mythological beasts in the martial god realm. Besides being shocked by Thowling's praise for the ancestral sorcerer, you, Howard, also found it hard to accept. You, Howard, when I broke the roots to condense the witchcraft spirit fruit, I finally remembered the true origin of this space. Where is it? After a short recovery, you, Howard, who had adapted to the loss of his dantian and original energy, stood up and asked directly. This is the wizard god space that the 12 most powerful ancestral sorcerer jointly cast during the final battle between the ancestral sorcerer and the ancient mythological beasts, Thowling said excitedly. Sizzle. When he heard that the space he was now in was the most violent space of ancient times, you, Howard, couldn't help but gasp. After gasping, you, Howard, thought of a more serious problem and immediately asked, "Thowling, we won't be trapped here forever, right?" Although losing his dantian made it difficult for him to improve his cultivation in the future, with the help of the 2 doppelgangers, he could still command the wind and clouds in the future and could still climb to the peak of martial arts. He absolutely couldn't be trapped in this space where even the ancient mythological beast kings could be exhausted to death. You, Howard, don't worry. Hearing you, Howard's concern, Thowling smiled and comforted him. This is only the outermost area of the wizard god space. It's the space where ordinary ancestral sorcerer and ordinary mythological beasts fought. It's also integrated with the Green Flame Secret Land. Chapter 899. In the Wizard God Space. Phew. As long as he was not trapped in the Wizard God Space, he could return to the peak of martial arts with the help of the 2 doppelgangers. Therefore, after hearing Thowling's comfort, Howard could not help but feel relieved. That's right. After letting out a long breath, Howard saw the wizard origin fruit in his hand and quickly asked, Thaling, what is the use of the wizard origin fruit condensed from a law? It can make your physical body easily advance to the complete 10th grade Martial King realm. Thaling replied with a smile. However, there was a hint of hesitation in his smile. Oh, it turns out to be a treasure specifically for physical cultivation. Nodding, Howard indicated that he understood. After all, the wizard ancestors in the wizard god space were a group of ancient creatures who specialized in physical cultivation. Most of the treasures from their space were probably only for physical cultivation. After swallowing the wizard origin fruit in 2 or 3 mouthfuls, Howard directly sat cross-legged on the back of the giant eagle, intending to use the wizard origin fruit to break through to the complete 10th grade Martial King realm. Because his Dantian had been destroyed and he had lost his cultivation, he could only rely on a strong physical body to survive in the dangerous wizard god space. As the wizard origin fruit was swallowed, Howard felt that the bottleneck of the complete 10th grade Martial King realm was instantly broken through by the huge energy from the wizard origin fruit, allowing his physical body to advance to the complete 10th grade Martial King realm. After his physical body had successfully advanced to the complete 10th grade Martial King realm, Howard found that the energy from the wizard origin fruit had only consumed less than 1/10 of it. He could not help but panic, since his martial disciple realm had advanced to the complete 10th grade Martial King realm. He had been pursuing a cultivation method where his cultivation and physical body could advance together. He had never let his cultivation or physical body break through to the next realm alone. However, the huge energy left by the wizard origin fruit in his body could obviously make his physical body break through to the martial emperor realm directly. This went against the belief he had always insisted on. Howard, your Dantian has been completely destroyed. You don't have any cultivation to speak of. So, you should focus on breaking through the grade of your physical body. Sensing the drastic change in Howard's mood, Thaling immediately knew what he was worried about and hurriedly reminded him. That's right. His Dantian had been completely destroyed by the suction force of the tree roots, and he had lost the chance to recover. So why didn't he focus on the cultivation of his physical body? If he was able to obtain the physical body cultivation method of the wizard ancestor in this wizard god space, perhaps he would be able to climb to the peak of martial arts with just his physical body alone and become a strong person who could dominate the Tianxian continent. Thinking of this, Howard continued to use the astral arts and started to use the enormous energy left behind by the wizard origin fruit to break through to the martial emperor realm. However, when he was trying to break through to the martial emperor realm, he vaguely felt that something was not quite right. However, after checking it back and forth with his mind 3 times, he did not find anything wrong. Therefore, Howard could only focus on continuing to break through to the martial emperor realm. The wizard origin fruit, which was specifically targeted at the physical body, did not allow the physical body bottleneck of the martial emperor realm to persist for long. It was easily broken through, allowing his physical body to successfully break through to the martial emperor realm. It was not until his physical body reached the peak of the 1st grade martial emperor that the energy from the wizard origin fruit was completely consumed. Originally, he wanted to use his mind to carefully check the increase in his strength after the breakthrough of the physical body grade. However, the giant eagle under his buttocks suddenly screamed, and then its entire body climbed directly onto the tree roots. He opened his eyes and wanted to look down to see why the giant eagle screamed. However, when he suddenly looked up, he finally realized the real reason why he felt that something was wrong. When he used the wizard origin fruit to break through to the physical body grade, his body was also growing bigger. Without the slightest hesitation, Howard directly left the giant eagle's back and jumped onto the tree roots. Then, he found that he had now turned into a giant who was nearly 700 meters tall. Thaling, what's going on? Howard asked in a panic. Howard, This is another effect of the wizard origin fruit. It can improve the grade of your body, and at the same time, it can also improve your physique. It can make your physique completely transform into the body of an ancestral wizard. The tower spirit replied with a guilty conscience. How can I become smaller? Howren asked eagerly. The bigger the body, the stronger the strength. It wasn't that he couldn't accept the changes in his body, but he needed to know how to control his height. Otherwise, when he left the wizard god space and the green flame secret land, he would not only be unable to face Qin Ling Fei, but also attract the attention of countless experts in the Tianxian continent. This, in the face of Howren's questioning, Faling, who did not know how to shrink his body, was suddenly speechless. Faling, don't tell me that you also don't know how to shrink your body. Faling's speechless reaction made Howren feel that something was wrong, so he immediately gritted his teeth and questioned. Howren, the previous device spirit, did not know much about the wizard ancestor, so I really don't know how to shrink my body. While explaining in a low voice, Faling looked at Howren's face. When he found that Howren's face suddenly became gloomy, he hurriedly comforted him. However, according to the memory of the previous device spirit, the ancient wizard ancestor seemed to maintain the body of a giant when fighting, and his usual practice in life were only slightly taller than an ordinary person. So, I think there should be a cultivation method of the wizard ancestor in the wizard god space. With the help of this cultivation method, you can restore your body. Faling, you'd better pray that there's a cultivation method of shrinking your body in the wizard god space. Otherwise, I won't say a word to you in the future, Howren threatened fiercely. In fact, the panic just now was only temporary. Because he could not adapt to the sudden increase in his body, there was a flaw in his state of mind. Now, after a short period of adjustment, he had completely thought it through. Originally, because his Dantian was destroyed and his cultivation was lost, he planned to let his second doppelganger replace his original body after leaving the wizard god space and the green flame secret realm. Now, his physical body had broken through the martial emperor realm, and his body had increased by nearly 700 meters, which made his original body more powerful. If he really could not shrink his body, he could enter the victor and use it as a trump card for his second doppelganger. Howren looked down at the giant eagle that he had squashed. He stretched out his giant palm to touch it and said apologetically, "Little eagle, I'm so sorry." As a bird born and bred in the wizard god space, the giant eagle had been using its roots to condense the wizard spirit fruit to improve the quality of its physical body. The strength of its physical body was not inferior to that of a rank 6 exotic beast at the peak of the king realm. Just now, it was overwhelmed by the sudden increase in weight. Chapter 900. In the wizard god's space. After seeing Howren's huge figure, which was nearly 700 meters tall, the giant eagle hurriedly screeched at Howren. "Don't worry, I don't need your help anymore," Howren said with a smile as he retracted his giant palm. While the wizard origin fruit improved his physique, it also allowed his aura to perfectly integrate with the wizard god space. Now, not only could he rely on his inner feelings to know where he needed to go next, but he could also understand the meaning of the giant eagle's screech. Screech! Hearing that Howren no longer needed its help, the giant eagle screeched and flapped its wings to soar into the sky, resuming its hunting life. After the giant eagle left, Howren looked down at the tree root under his feet, and a thought flashed through his mind. He took out the elixir used to lure the giant eagle from his storage ring and put on the tree root. In less than a second, the elixir was swallowed by the suction force formed by the tree root. However, after waiting for a full 5 minutes, Howren couldn't help but frown when he saw that there was no reaction from the tree root. Then, he looked up at the surrounding environment and strode away from the tree root, heading straight to the west side of the forest. Less than 10,000 meters into the west side of the forest, a deafening roar was heard. Looking at the giant, colorful tiger in front of him, which was 100 meters tall and more than 400 meters long, Howren couldn't help but grin. Judging by the aura, the colorful tiger thought that it was prey that was approaching it quickly. However, after seeing Yuhaoran, who was nearly 700 meters tall, the colorful tiger immediately turned around and ran away. "Kitty, don't run. I'm going to experiment on you." Seeing the colorful tiger turn around and run away without hesitation, Yuhaoran smiled and stretched out his two giant palms. He easily grabbed the colorful tiger that was more than 400 meters long and quickly walked back to the tree root. First, he took out the elixir that he used to feed the giant eagle from his storage ring and forced it into the mouth of the colorful tiger. Then, he pressed it firmly against the tree root. It didn't take long, only about 3 seconds. As the medicinal efficacy of the pill was absorbed by the tiger, a suction force directly extracted the medicinal efficacy from the tiger's body. About a minute later, a witchcraft origin fruit that was slightly smaller than an ordinary cherry condensed in front of the colorful tiger. "Stay here obediently and don't move. I'm going to continue experimenting on you later." Yuhaoran directly threw the colorful tiger aside. After a few threatening words, he pinched the witchcraft origin fruit that was condensed from the tree root. Compared to his height of nearly 700 meters, the witchcraft origin fruit, which was only the size of a cherry, was really too small. It was so small that he doubted whether he had pinched the witchcraft origin fruit just now. It was so small that he wondered if the witchcraft origin fruit had fallen between his teeth. However, when a familiar energy came from his body, Yuhaoran confirmed that the witchcraft origin fruit had entered his stomach and verified that his idea was feasible. "Come here!" Yuhaoran yelled at the colorful tiger that was obediently crawling on the side and not daring to move. The colorful tiger, which was more obedient than a kitten, quickly ran to Yuhaoran's feet. "Take this." He directly took out more than a dozen elixirs that were used to improve cultivation from his storage ring, and then ordered the colorful tiger to swallow them all. With the experience just now, the colorful tiger knew that Yuhaoran didn't want to take its life. He only intended to obtain the witchcraft origin fruit condensed from the progenitor tree through it. Therefore, it opened its bloody mouth and swallowed all the elixirs that Yuhaoran threw at it. The colorful tiger obediently crawled on the tree root. A minute later, a witchcraft origin fruit the size of a longan was successfully condensed in front of the colorful tiger. It reached out its giant palm and pinched the witchcraft origin fruit, then threw it directly into its mouth. When the energy of the witchcraft origin fruit exploded and quickly integrated into his body, Yuhaoran couldn't help but frown. Seeing Yuhaoran frown, Thaling, who knew the results of the experiment just now, reminded him, "Yuhaoran, as an alchemy master who is proficient in alchemy, you should know that the more elixirs you take, the worse the effect of the elixir." "Of course I know," Yuhaoran said somewhat gloomily as he eased his frown. "But the witchcraft origin fruit of different sizes contains different energy, so the enhancement effect should also be different. Why is the witchcraft origin fruit the size of a longan the same as the cherry-sized witchcraft origin fruit for the enhancement of the physical body grade?" "Sorry, I don't know either." Thaling shook his head to indicate that he didn't know either. "Get up." In this regard, Yuhaoran didn't continue to ask. Instead, he lowered his head and gestured to the colorful tiger that was crawling on the tree root. Yuhaoran compared the height of the colorful tiger and felt that it was just right for him to ride on. He kicked its butt directly, then pointed to the depths of the forest and ordered fiercely, "Carry me," and continued to move forward. "Awoo!" With a low growl, the colorful tiger stood up directly, then turned around obediently and agreed to become Yuhaoran's mount. "Let's go." Yuhaoran spread his legs and rode directly on the colorful tiger's back. He slapped its butt with his broad palm and shouted excitedly, "Awoo!" With another low growl, the colorful tiger rushed into the depths of the forest like a gust of wind. Half an hour later, Yuhaoran, who was riding on the colorful tiger's back, gradually became serious. This was because he found that the deeper he went into the forest, the larger the creatures he encountered were, and the more violent they were. Especially the gray rat that he luckily got rid of by relying on the speed of the gust of wind just now. Its body was more than 1,000 meters long. If it weren't for the towering ancient trees and the temptation of elixirs, he and the colorful tiger would have become the gray rat's food. Oh, after traveling for about 100,000 meters, a stream appeared unexpectedly in front of them. The colorful tiger stopped and then showed an attitude that it would never jump over the stream, even if it had to kill it. Be careful on the way back. Yu Haoran gently patted the colorful tiger's back and said with concern, "Oh." The colorful tiger raised its head and growled at Yu Haoran to remind him. Then it turned around and quickly went back the way it came. Looking at the quiet stream in front of him, Yu Haoran took a deep breath, bent his legs slightly, and then jumped directly over the stream and to the other side. Puff! But just as he landed on the hard ground on the other side of the stream, a fierce, murderous aura directly strangled his internal organs, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. If his body hadn't been transformed into the body of an ancestral wizard through the transformation of wizard elemental energy, the fierce, murderous aura just now would have killed him directly. Chapter 901. In the wizard god's space. No wonder the multicolored tiger was unwilling to go to the opposite side of the stream. There was such a fierce, murderous aura on the opposite side. Yu Haoran, if my guess is correct, the forest opposite the stream is probably the battlefield where the wizard ancestors and the mythological beasts fought in ancient times. Thowling reminded Yu Haoran with a solemn expression after carefully sensing the fierce, murderous aura through Yu Haoran's body with his divine thoughts. Thowling, is there any secret method that can resist the fierce, murderous aura? Yu Haoran asked unwillingly as he wiped off the remaining blood at the corner of his mouth. Yes. Thowling nodded and let Yu Haoran's spirit leave Victor and return to the sea of consciousness. The dark armor technique uses the strength of the body to condense an armor with defensive power that is not inferior to the ninth heaven black iron. The pagoda spirit, who had accompanied Yu Haoran's soul out of the territory tower, introduced the origin of the cultivation technique that it had given Yu Haoran. At the same time, it used its spiritual concentration technique to transmit the dark armor technique directly into Yu Haoran's soul. According to the dark armor technique taught by Thowling, Yu Haoran closed his eyes and carefully comprehended it for an hour. After feeling that he had almost completely understood the essence of the secret method, he began to use the spirit and the strength of the body to perform the secret method. When his body was completely covered by a layer of green armor, the fierce, murderous aura that made his skin hurt was immediately and easily blocked. Thowling, if you have such a powerful secret method, why didn't you teach it to me in advance? After feeling the powerful power of the dark armor technique, Yu Haoran was pleasantly surprised and could not help but complain about Thowling. Yu Haoran, you have to touch your conscience when you speak. Now, carefully feel the physical strength requirements for performing the dark armor technique. After hearing Yu Haoran's inexplicable complaint, Thowling immediately retorted with dissatisfaction. Based on the grade of your body before, even if I gave you the dark armor technique, would you be able to practice it? Hee. In the face of Thowling's exasperated complaints, Yu Haoran could only let out a hollow laugh and hurriedly apologized. It was a slip of the tongue. Please forgive me. After that, Yu Haoran didn't care whether Thowling had calmed down or not. He continued to walk deeper into the forest. Thowling, what kind of exotic beast is that? More than 30,000 meters into the forest, Yu Haoran was attracted by a dead bird lying on the ground in front of him. However, after rummaging through his memories, he couldn't find any information about exotic beasts similar to the bird before him. He could only turn to Thowling for help. This is an ordinary divine beast from ancient times. It's called the deer sparrow. It possesses a terrifying speed that far surpasses the laws of speed. It's usually used to transmit important information. Thowling explained in detail as he looked at the bird carcass with a wingspan of only 30 meters. Yu Haoran, flip the deer sparrow's carcass over. See if there's anything under its armpit. Speaking of transmitting important information, Thowling suddenly realized that the deer sparrow that had died at the edge of the battlefield might be hiding important information about the Great War of ancient times. He hurriedly reminded Zhang Che. The deer sparrow's wingspan was only 30 meters. In front of Yu Haoran, who was almost 700 meters tall, it was like an ordinary sparrow. He easily flipped it over. However, he didn't find anything. Yu Haoran cut the area under the deer sparrow's left armpit, where the bone is connected to it. Fowling continued to instruct after observing it carefully. As his body grew taller, his nails also grew longer. Without the need to use any artifacts, his nails directly cut through the skin under the deer sparrow's armpit, revealing a small gray stone. However, Yu Haoran's attention was not on the small gray stone. Fowling, according to what you said just now, this space is the space of the sorcerer god, and this deer sparrow in front of us is a divine beast. Then, with my strength at the peak of the first-grade martial royal realm, I'm afraid that I can't so easily cut through the deer sparrow's skin defense. Yu Haoran asked in confusion. Yu Haoran, in ancient times, divine beast was just a name. Not all divine beasts were the martial god realm or above. Hearing Yu Haoran's question, Fowling indicated for him to send the small gray stone into the victor in his mind, as he explained with a smile. And this deer sparrow in front of us is at most a 7th-grade martial revered realm. Even if the space of the sorcerer god can slow down the corrosion of time on corpses, this deer sparrow in front of us has probably become an ordinary beast by now. Understand. As Yu Haoran nodded his head, he hurriedly asked about the origin of the small gray stone. This is a transmission stone. It's the same as the transmission jade talisman that you're using now. It's an ordinary magic tool used to transmit important information. While answering Yu Haoran's question, Fowling used his divine sense to check the information in the small gray stone. Unfortunately, the corrosion of time had caused the energy in the gray stone to completely disappear, and it could no longer retain the information that it needed to transmit. Sigh. Looking at the stone that had turned into a pile of gray powder, Fowling couldn't help but sigh in pity. Pagoda Spirit, you've experienced the transition between the Middle Ages and the near-ancient times. Even if there's important information left in the messenger stone, it's useless to you and me now. Hearing the Pagoda Spirit's sigh, Yu Haoran smiled and comforted him. That's true. The Tower Spirit agreed with a little insincerely. Looking up ahead, Yu Haoran took a step forward and continued to move forward. After moving forward for more than 100,000 meters, Yu Haoran couldn't help but open his mouth wide. He looked at the corpse of the ancestral sorcerer that was nearly 7,000 meters tall in front of him with a shocked expression. Fowling, an ancestral sorcerer that was nearly 7,000 meters tall. What was his true strength? Yu Haoran forcefully swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked with a trembling voice. All right, I forgot to tell you the difference between the strength and height of the ancestral sorcerer. After hearing Yu Haoran's question, Fowling realized his negligence. The height of the ancestral sorcerer is the same as the martial arts realm. Every time you break through a realm, your height will increase by 10 times. For example, the height of the ancestral sorcerer in the martial disciple realm is between 1 meter and 33 meters. The height of the ancestral sorcerer in the martial warrior realm is between 34 meters and 66 meters. And the height of the ancestral sorcerer in the martial master realm is between 67 meters and 99 meters. If you break through the martial master realm and advance to the martial ancestor realm, then the height of the ancestral sorcerer will directly break through 100 meters and reach between 100 meters and 333 meters. At this point, Fowling signaled Yu Haoran to carefully measure the true height of the ancestral sorcerer's corpse in front of him. After getting the accurate number, Fowling gave the true cultivation of the ancestral sorcerer before he died. Peak 9th grade martial revered. Fowling, according to the difference between the height and the realm of the ancestral sorcerer, then the height of the ancestral sorcerer that broke through to the martial god realm would be over 10,000 meters. Chapter 902. It was a bit slow. In the wizard god's space. Yu Haoran, do you know how tall the 12 strongest ancestral wizards in ancient times were? Feeling the shock in Yu Haoran's tone, Thowling could not help but want to further stimulate him and let him truly realize the strength of the top ancestral wizards. Thowling, don't tell me he reached 100,000 meters. According to the ratio between the ancestral wizard's height and realm, Howren's voice trembled as he gave a height that he thought was already the limit. However, Thowling gave him a height that he could not imagine at all. Wrong, it's 1,000,000 meters. If it was 10,000 meters or 100,000 meters, there was still room for imagination. However, 1,000,000 meters was far beyond his understanding, and he was not as shocked as he was at the beginning. Looking down at the ancestral wizard's corpse lying flat on the ground, Howren began to search carefully, hoping to obtain the ancestral wizard's cultivation method. It could not only allow him to return to his original height, but also allow him to climb to the peak of martial arts through the cultivation of his physical body. Unfortunately, the ancestral wizard's corpse in front of him, other than the animal skin that could be used to cover the important parts of the body, there was nothing else, not to mention the cultivation method. Thowling, how did the ancestral wizards in ancient times usually store items? Howren asked as his gaze fell on the 10 fingers of the ancestral wizard's corpse. The ancestral wizards below the martial god realm used storage-type magic tools, just like now. Through Howren's sea of consciousness, Thowling answered Howren's question as he also checked the ancestral wizard's corpse. This was because he did not forget the purpose of venturing into the depths of the forest. However, the result was exactly the same as Howren's. He did not find anything. Thowling, with the ancestral wizard's cultivation at the peak of the 9th level martial revered realm, I think it's impossible for him not to have a storage-type magic tool. Howren questioned somewhat angrily as he stretched out his leg and kicked the ancestral wizard's finger. In ancient times, the richness of resources is far beyond your imagination. Materials like space crystals can be seen everywhere. Therefore, it can be said that everyone has a storage-type artifact. Knowing the reason for Howren's anger, Thowling carefully examined the ancestral witch's corpse while answering Howren's question. According to the way this ancestral witch's corpse died, his vitality should have been directly extinguished by a powerful force. Moreover, an ancestor of sorcerer in the martial venerable realm is just an ordinary nobody in the ancestor of sorcerer tribe. No one should be interested in his storage device. What? While carefully examining the corpse, Thowling deduced to himself. Just as Thowling was puzzled, he accidentally discovered that there was a slight difference between the closed eyes of the Grand Wizard. Thowling hurriedly instructed as he recalled the description of the wizard ancestor in the memories of the previous weapon spirit. Howren, lift the eyelids of the ancestral witch's eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly lifted the eyelids of the ancestral witch's eyes with his index and middle fingers. He immediately discovered the difference. Because the eyes of the ancestral witch were different. One was normal black and white, while the other was purple like a star. Howren, directly pull out the purple eyeball for me. Thowling also found that the ancestral witch's eyes were abnormal. He could not suppress his excitement and ordered in a hoarse voice. He opened the index and middle fingers of the normal eyes, then used his sharp nails to directly pull out the purple eyeball and send it into Thowling's hand in the sea of consciousness. Howren, your real chance to rise is here. As soon as the purple eyeball was in his hand, Thowling immediately stood up excitedly and shouted in an extremely excited tone. Thowling, calm down and concentrate. The fact that the pagoda spirit was so excited meant that the purple eyeball must be an unimaginable treasure. Therefore, Howren also urgently wanted to know the origin of the purple eyeball. However, seeing that Thowling was so excited that he forgot to introduce the purple eyeball, he could not help but remind him. Thowling took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed his excitement. However, he did not immediately introduce the origin of the purple eyeball in his hand. Instead, he pointed to the corpse of the ancestral witch and asked, Howren, do you know the true identity of this ancestral witch? Through the use of examples, he further highlighted the importance of the item that originally needed to be introduced. It was not the first time that he had seen Thowling's method. Therefore, Howard could only calm down and cooperate with him. I don't know. Howard shook his head and indicated. The ancestral, which was born to fight. Even when facing a strong expert that was countless times stronger than him, he still dared to fight with his life. As a peak ninth grade, Marshall revered ancestral witch. Although it was impossible for him to enter the battlefield that would decide the fate of his race, it was absolutely impossible for him to leave the battlefield without permission. Then, why did this ancestral, which in front of us, take the initiative to leave the battlefield? Just give a good example. Why do you have to ask so many questions? Faced with Thaling's interrogation, Howard could not help but roll his eyes at Thaling. However, he very cooperatively shook his head to indicate that he did not know. Because this ancestral, which was forcefully sent out of the battlefield. There's only one reason, and that is that the strongest 12 ancestral witches knew that there was no hope of winning the race war. They planned to leave behind a trace of the ancestral witch's bloodline so that they could rise again in the future. Thaling, what do you mean? Originally, Howard was still complaining about Thaling's superfluous actions. However, when he heard his speculation, his interest was immediately aroused. At the same time, a shocking thought appeared in his mind. Speak. Thaling indicated. This ancestral, which in front of us, is very likely to be the descendant of one of the 12 strongest ancestral witches. Combining the many massacres that he had experienced in his previous life and the choices that the experts of those sects and clans made when faced with certain death, Howard could not help but excitedly guess. No. Shaking his head to deny Howard's speculation, Thaling stated his own speculation. According to the origin of this purple eyeball, I suspect that this ancestral which in front of us is very likely to be the young clan leader of the entire ancestral witch tribe. Thaling, could it be that there's a clan leader with higher cultivation and stronger strength in the ancestral witch tribe? According to Thaling's introduction of the ancestral witch tribe at the beginning, Howard had always thought that the 12 strongest ancestral witches were in charge of the entire ancestral witch tribe. However, this did not seem to be the case. Yes, nodding his head, Thaling said in a somewhat regretful tone. But for some reason, when the world was just settled and all living things began to fight, that expert with the ability to penetrate the heavens and the earth disappeared unexpectedly. Chapter 903. He was still in a state of stupor. In the wizard god's space, the 12 ancestral wizards with the highest cultivation and strongest strength were all more than 1,000,000 meters tall. Then, how tall would the patriarch who once ruled the entire ancestral wizard tribe be? This was the first thought that emerged in Howard's mind after receiving Thaling's confirmation. Howard, the patriarch of the ancestral wizard tribe, his cultivation and strength have reached the realm of returning to the natural state, and he can freely control his own height. Even in the process of battle, he doesn't need to transform to improve his strength. After hearing Howard's question, Thaling thought for a moment and answered. Therefore, the true height of the patriarch of the ancestral wizard tribe is a secret. No one knows how tall he is. Nodding, Howard's attention shifted from the patriarch of the ancestral wizard tribe to the purple eyeball in Thaling's hand. Then he asked bluntly, Thaling, what kind of treasure is this purple eyeball? Actually, this is a planet from ancient times. Taking a deep breath, Thaling still could not suppress the excitement in his heart and introduced. According to the memory left by the previous weapon spirit, this is the planet closest to the ancient continent called the Ancestral Star. In the Ancestral Star, not only does it contain innate spiritual energy, which is one level higher than the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but it also has endless ancient cultivation resources. Later, the Ancestral Star was forcibly refined into a magic tool by the patriarch of the ancestral wizard tribe, using unimaginable means that defied the natural order. In fact, I suspect that the 9 kings of the ancient divine beasts killed the ancestral wizard tribe. I'm afraid it's also related to the magic tool refined by the Ancestral Star. At this point, Thaling looked at Howard and roared in an excited tone. Howard, with this purple eyeball, It's equivalent to having a planet's resources. With a planet that retains ancient times, the future Wu Zun, Emperor Wu, and even the martial god realm are no longer just a dream. Compared to Thaling's uncontrollable excitement, Yu Haoran was surprisingly calm. Because through Thaling's introduction just now, he suddenly realized a problem that was very likely far from being as beautiful as Thaling had imagined. Thaling, when did the patriarch of the ancestral witch tribe disappear? Yu Haoran asked calmly, ignoring Thaling's excited roar. Thaling did not realize that something was wrong with Yu Haoran, so he casually replied, when the heavens and earth were first settled, and all living things began to compete for hegemony. How long has it been since the ancestral wizard race was destroyed? Yu Haoran asked. A few 100 million years, Thaling replied casually. Then the young patriarch of the ancestral sorcerer tribe. How high is his cultivation and how old is he? Pointing at the ancestral sorcerer in front of him, Yu Haoran continued to ask. Peak 9th grade martial revered realm. His age should be around 10,000. At this time, Thaling finally realized that something was wrong. 10,000, hundreds of millions. Hearing the number given by Thaling, Yu Haoran could not help but ask with a sneer. Thaling, with such a long time in between, I don't know how this so-called young patriarch was born. Yu Haoran's rhetorical question made Thaling realize that he had made an obvious common-sense mistake, so he quickly motioned him not to disturb him for the time being. Then, Thaling began to refine the purple eyeball in his hand, wanting to see if the purple eyeball was, as he had just speculated, a magic tool refined by the ancient planet. Perhaps the purple eyeball was really refined by the ancestral witch tribe's patriarch himself, and had withstood the erosion of a long time. Even if Thaling used the divine sense of a peak 9th grade martial revered realm and the best refining techniques, it took him nearly 10 hours to refine the purple eyeball. When his divine sense entered the interior of the purple eyeball and saw the situation inside, Thaling's face instantly became gloomy. Thaling, what did you find? Thaling's instantly gloomy face made Yu Haoran's speculation become a reality. The corpse of the ancestral, which in front of him was not the young patriarch at all, and the purple eyeball was not the magic tool refined by the ancestral witch tribe's patriarch. Yu Haoran, it seems that we have all been deceived, Thaling said gloomily as his divine sense withdrew from the purple eyeball space. Thaling, your judgment was wrong. It was not the ancestral witch who deceived us. After receiving Thaling's confirmation, Yu Haoran was a little disappointed, but because he did not have much hope in the beginning, he was able to calmly face the reality of empty joy. No, shaking his head, Thaling explained with a dignified look. When I said that we were deceived, it did not include you. It was referring to me and the 9 great mythical beast kings of the ancient times. Thaling, what do you mean? Thaling's unexpected explanation made Yu Haoran frown. He was just introducing the purple eyeball, so why did he suddenly mention the 9 great mythical beast kings of the ancient times? Yu Haoran, the purple eyeball in my hand is the ancestral star that was refined by the patriarch of the sorcerer tribe. However, the innate spiritual chi and all the cultivation resources in the magic tool space have been emptied in advance. Thaling threw the refined purple eyeball to Yu Haoran and continued. I think that the 12 strongest ancestral witches of the sorcerer tribe have long sensed the fate of the sorcerer tribe's extinction. Not only have they emptied the innate spiritual chi and cultivation resources in the entire ancestral star in advance, but they must have also quietly transferred away some of the elites of the sorcerer tribe. I think that the news that the sorcerer tribe has the successor of the patriarch should be fake news released by the 12 ancestral witches in order to protect the people who were transferred away. I think that this ancestral, which who has the magic tool of the ancestral star, should be used to attract the attention of the 9 great mythical beast kings of the ancient times, so that the 12 ancestral witches could use the space of the sorcerer god to completely seal the 2 sides of the battle, so as to ensure that the people who were transferred away could successfully survive. Yu Haoran nodded in agreement with Thaling's conjecture, but he did not pay too much attention to it. Because of the changes in the ancient times, the Middle Ages, and the near ancient times, there were no traces of the ancestral witches left in the world. This meant that they were either completely wiped out after encountering danger, either that, due to the low fertility rate, they would completely disappear in the end. Therefore, without responding to Thaling's conjecture, Howard's divine thought directly entered the space of the purple eyeball. Then, he was completely stunned by the space of the purple eyeball, the space that his divine thought could not see the end of the vast and boundless grasslands and forests, as well as the fresh and comfortable environment, was similar to the Tianxian continent that he was living in now. This made him mistakenly think that he was in a new world. However, the spiritual qi that was so thin that it was completely undetectable woke him up quickly, and he hurriedly searched for the cultivation method that the ancestral witch left in the space. Chapter 904. In the Sorcerer God's Space. Howard threw the purple eyeball to Thaling and adjusted his disappointment through breathing. He looked up at the depths of the forest and continued walking. After receiving the purple eyeball, the tower genie opened its mouth to say something, but it seemed to have thought of something. In the end, it sighed and didn't say anything. However, looking at the purple eyeball in his hand, Thaling's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. With a height of nearly 700 meters, even if he was walking, his speed was not inferior to flying in the air. 3 minutes later, about 500 meters deep into the forest, Howard encountered the second ancestral witch corpse that was more than 500 meters tall. However, after being eroded by the passage of time, the ancestral witch corpse that was about 500 meters tall had already rotted. There was nothing valuable left at the scene. Howard did not care about this and continued walking forward. Only 20 seconds later, he saw another ancestral witch corpse that was about the same height as him. Just like the second corpse, it had been corroded by the passage of time. Howard only glanced at it and continued walking forward without stopping. In the next period of time, he encountered 5 more ancestral witch corpses that were about 700 to 800 meters tall and were about the same level as him. He did not stop to pay attention to the corpses that had been corroded by the passage of time. However, at the same time, he encountered a problem. As he approached the periphery of the battlefield, the murderous aura that was getting stronger and stronger had already penetrated the defense of the dark armor technique and started to hurt his body. By the time he encountered the corpse of the 8th Grand Wizard Corpse, which was over 1,000 meters tall and had broken through to the Martial Saint realm, the dark armor technique was no longer able to withstand the fierce murderous aura, making it difficult for him to continue approaching the corpse of the Grand Wizard Corpse. Howard looked at the ancestral wizard in front of him, who was barely able to withstand the erosion of time and was still intact. Moreover, the ancestral wizard had a gray ring on his finger and was only 30 meters away from him. Howard revealed an unwilling expression. One step. He only needed to take one step to reach the corpse of the ancestral witch and take the gray ring on its finger. It was very likely that he would obtain the cultivation method in the gray ring. However, the fierce murderous aura did not allow him to take a single step forward. He could not even move a meter. He could only watch helplessly. Thaling, do you have any stronger defensive secret techniques? Although he was not sure whether the gray ring was a storage instrument or not, and he was not sure whether the ring contained the cultivation method of the ancestral witch, the hope of gambling was right in front of him. If he couldn't obtain the gray ring smoothly, not only would he be unwilling, but it would also affect his state of mind. Yes. At the same time, Thaling's tone changed, and the glimmer of hope that had just risen in his heart was instantly extinguished. But with your current state and strength, you can't cultivate it. Thaling, do you have a way to get that gray ring? Howard asked unwillingly as he pointed at the gray ring on the finger of the ancestral witch's corpse that was 30 meters away. Howard, I can't even leave my mind. How can I get that gray ring? Thaling continued to pour cold water on him. What if I use the possession technique and let you control my body? Howard did not give up and continued to propose. After a long time, The rules of the wizard god space can even kill a powerhouse in the Einherjar realm. You want me to use the possession technique to fight against the fierce, murderous aura? Aren't you asking me to die? Although Howren's tone was getting more and more irritable, Thowling, who was deceived by the 12 ancestral witches, was also in a bad mood. Therefore, his tone and attitude in response to Howren's questions were getting more and more intense. He could not cultivate a stronger defensive secret technique, and he could not use the possession technique. Facing the gray ring that was so close but could not be obtained, a violent emotion quickly emerged and gradually began to affect his state of mind. When the violent emotion reached its peak, Howren could not help but roar into the sky. Accompanied by the deafening roar, an unimaginably strong, murderous aura soared into the sky. Then, the strong, murderous aura gradually condensed into a giant that was nearly 1,000 meters tall. It looked 80% similar to Howren, but its body was illusory. The giant that was condensed by the murderous aura clenched its fists and roared furiously at the depths of the forest. Although the roar did not make any sound, it formed an invisible energy wave that directly broke through the barrier of the fierce, murderous aura and finally transmitted to the depths of the forest where the ancestral witches and the ancient mythical beasts were fighting. The invisible energy directly broke the peaceful atmosphere of the battlefield, causing the battlefield that had been peaceful for hundreds of millions or billions of years to suddenly be filled with murderous aura. 12 ancestral witches' silhouettes that were hundreds of meters tall and 9 different giant mythical beast silhouettes reappeared in the center of the battlefield. Affected by their instincts, the 21 giant creatures in the center of the battlefield roared and rushed towards each other and started fighting again. Every time an ancestral witch's silhouette that was hundreds of meters tall used a martial skill to attack a mythical beast, a mysterious aura of energy would float out from the ancestral witches' bodies. This mysterious aura of energy was violently rejected by the murderous aura on the battlefield and quickly floated to the periphery of the battlefield, finally merging into the body of the giant that Howren had condensed with the strong, murderous aura. When the first mysterious aura merged into the body of the giant that was condensed by the murderous aura, not only did the giant's body gradually solidify, but its facial features also became clearer. At the same time, Howren's body trembled slightly, and a surprised expression quickly surged into his heart. Without any hesitation, he continued to maintain the anger in his heart so that he could continue condensing the giant's body with the murderous aura above his head. At the same time, he also began to comprehend the mysterious energy that had just merged into the murderous aura. As more and more mysterious energy floated from the center of the battlefield, not only did the giant's body that was condensed by the murderous aura become more and more substantial, but Howren's height also began to shrink slowly. Thowling, who had also noticed the changes in Howren's body, was shocked. The violent emotions that had originally emerged in his heart seemed to have been affected by the murderous aura on the battlefield and were gradually pulled out, allowing him to gradually calm down. As the violent aura gradually disappeared, Thowling finally understood why he had made such an obvious mistake in his judgment and why he had refuted Howren so fiercely just now. It turned out that ever since they had crossed the stream and entered the battlefield that was filled with the murderous aura, their minds had been affected by the murderous aura. The dark armor technique could only resist the murderous aura's attack, but it could not eliminate the murderous aura's erosion of the mind. In the end, it would cause the mind to lose control, causing the violent emotions to erupt. Chapter 905. In the Wizard God's Space. Half an hour later, as Howren's height shrunk from nearly 700 meters to less than 100 meters, the 12 ancestral witches and the shadows of the 9 mythical beast kings that were violently tearing each other apart gradually calmed down. Then, a cold and emotionless eye appeared above the Wizard God's Space. When the eye appeared from the Wizard God's Space and looked at the strongest ancestral witches, the ancestral witch's shadow exploded immediately. The countless shadows that were blown apart merged into the murderous aura on the battlefield, causing the weakened murderous aura in the center of the battlefield to become fierce and intense again. Right after the first ancestral witch's shadow exploded, the eye looked directly at one of the 9 mythical beast kings in the center of the battlefield, the primordial divine dragon with the strongest cultivation and strength. Just like the first ancestral witch that the eye focused on, the primordial divine dragon's shadow exploded right away. Then countless shadows merged into the murderous aura. In the next dozens of seconds, the shadows of the 11 ancestral witches and 8 mythical beast kings all exploded under the gaze of the eye and merged into the murderous aura in the center of the battlefield. Phew! Just as the last ancestral witch in the center of the battlefield exploded, Howren, who had shrunk to 88 meters in height, immediately opened his eyes with an excited smile on his face. After merging with the mysterious energy separated from the 12 ancestral witches, he knew that the inheritance of the ancestral witches in ancient times was not through jade slips and books. Instead, it was through the inheritance of the ancestral witches' cultivation methods and martial arts skills. The mysterious energy that merged into the giant formed by the murderous aura was some of the instinctive memories left by the 12 ancestral witches. After the instinctive memories helped him to activate the ancestral witch's bloodline inheritance that was transformed by the wizard vitality fruit, the remaining memories were transformed into their previous cultivation comprehension. Now, he had the complete cultivation methods and martial arts skills of the bloodline inheritance, and also the comprehension of the 12 ancestral witches with the strongest cultivation and strength. Howren knew very well that even if his dantian was destroyed and his cultivation was crippled, he would not be inferior to his former self on the path of martial arts in the future. He would not lose to the top geniuses of the guardian and successor families. Slowly exhaling the foul air that had accumulated in his chest, Howren got up and turned away from the battlefield. This was because when he received the instinctive memories of the 12 ancestral sorcerers, the giant's virtual body that was formed by the murderous aura could clearly feel that the fierce murderous aura in the center of the battlefield had begun to spread outwards. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to withstand the impact of the fierce, killing intent. Howren's quick steps turned into a jog and finally into a sprint. Just as the murderous aura was about 3 meters behind him, Howren leaped over the stream in time and returned to the safety of the opposite bank. Howren secretly breathed out a sigh of relief when he sensed the fierce, killing intent that was at least dozens of times stronger on the other side of the spring. After that, he turned around and strode back to the tree root that could produce the witchcraft fruit. In the instinctive memories of the 12 ancestral witches, there was information about the tree root with a diameter of more than 10,000 meters. Ancestor tree was the name given by the ancient ancestral magi to the giant trees with a diameter of more than 10,000 meters. The ancestor tree was not only the spiritual symbol of the ancient wizards, but also the source of energy for them to obtain great power. Although the broken progenitor tree had lost its ability to provide energy, it was still able to comfort the severely injured Grand Wizard. More importantly, the tree root of the progenitor tree was the only way to leave the wizard god space and return to the Green Flame's secret realm. Now that he had successfully activated the inheritance of the ancestral magi bloodline and obtained the cultivation comprehension of the 12 ancestral witches, there was no benefit in continuing to stay. Moreover, when the giant shadow formed by the murderous aura received the instinctive memories of the 12 ancestral witches, he vaguely felt that there seemed to be a pair of feminine eyes staring at him from the wizard god space. This feeling made him very uncomfortable. Therefore, he planned to leave the wizard god space as soon as possible through the progenitor tree. Using the ancestral magi's cultivation method that he had just obtained, Howren regained his height of nearly 700 meters and strode back to the progenitor tree. However, when he was less than 100 miles away from the progenitor tree, he unexpectedly saw a gray rat that was more than 1,000 meters long chasing after the colorful tiger crazily. From the colorful tiger's blood-stained wounds, Yu Haoran knew that the gray rat was playing with the tiger. Otherwise, with the gray rat's strength, it could have killed the colorful tiger long ago. 1,000 meters long body. According to the division between the ancestral magi and the realm, the gray rat was a wizard beast that had just broken through the martial sage realm. Although there was a gap of a realm between them, Yu Haoran was not afraid at all. Using the ancestral magi's martial skill that he had just obtained, he mobilized the enormous strength of the ancestral magi's body. With a seemingly simple, but actually unimaginable heavy punch, he directly smashed the gray rat's head into meat paste. The colorful tiger, who had just escaped death, looked at Yu Haoran, who had returned to the progenitor tree. Its tensed emotions instantly relaxed, but in the end, it directly fainted. Shaking his head with some heartache, Yu Haoran bent down and picked up the colorful tiger, then quickly walked back to the roots of the progenitor tree. He laid the colorful tiger flat on the roots, then took out a dozen elixirs from the storage ring and stuffed all of them into the tiger's mouth. After the progenitor tree had condensed a witchcraft origin fruit that was the size of a longan, Yu Haoran stuffed the witchcraft origin fruit into the colorful tiger's mouth while cutting his finger, allowing his blood to drip onto the progenitor tree's roots. When the witchcraft origin fruit began to heal the colorful tiger's injuries, a whirlpool gradually appeared on the progenitor tree's roots that had been infused with his blood. When half of its injuries had healed and its unconscious consciousness had gradually awakened, the colorful tiger looked at Yu Haoran, who was standing next to the whirlpool, and opened its mouth, wanting to growl a few times. However, Yu Haoran shook his head at it and reminded it, "Little tiger, cultivate well and strive to have the strength to enter the other side of the stream as soon as possible. When you're able to activate the ancestral magi's bloodline inheritance, you'll know how to leave this wizard god space. When that time comes, you'll be able to go to the outside world to train and have a chance to find me. My name is Yu Haoran, and I'm from the great Emperor Qin Kingdom of the southern region." After leaving behind a reminder to meet again if fate wills it, Yu Haoran directly jumped into the whirlpool. "Awoo!" Looking at Yu Haoran, who jumped into the whirlpool without hesitation, the colorful tiger growled a few times. The tiger's eyes that were originally dull and lifeless gradually brightened up and became determined. Just as Yu Haoran left the wizard god space, on a giant tree branch about 1,000 miles away from the progenitor tree, a white fox with 8 tails had a cold gleam in its scarlet eyes. The ancestral magi's body could be said to be the strongest physical body in the world. No matter how strong the whirlpool's rotating force was, Yu Haoran could still maintain his consciousness. He counted the time silently in his heart. Chapter 906. Green Flame, Secret Realm, Green Region. Yu Haoran quickly raised his head and looked at his surroundings. He discovered that he had appeared in a dense forest. At the same time, a wave of pure spiritual energy rushed towards him. Looking at the tallest tree in the forest, which only reached his shoulders, he knew that he had successfully left the sorcerer god space and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Then his consciousness touched the mark in his mind, and Yu Haoran's body directly entered Victor. Thowling, I plan to use Victor's time acceleration ability to cultivate the body of the ancestral, which to a normal height in the shortest time possible. Okay. Without any hesitation, Thowling nodded in agreement and activated Victor's time acceleration ability. At the same time, he apologized to Yu Haoran, who had stepped into the accelerated space. Thowling, when I received the instinctive memories of the 12 ancestral witches, I already knew why we were so impulsive. So, the situation back then was neither your fault nor mine. Blame the special environment of the sorcerer god space. Yu Haoran turned his head and smiled as he comforted the tower spirit. Then, he stepped into the space where time was accelerated. "Antly, are you all right?" Looking at the pale Aunt Lee, who was bleeding from the corner of her mouth, Yuling asked with concern. "Yuling, I'm fine." Shaking her head, Bailey turned her head and looked behind her, her eyes filled with fear. Then, she turned around and handed a silver storage ring to Yuling as she instructed, "Don't worry. Yuling, the Green Flame's secret realm has been open for 8 days. At most, we only have one more day before the secret realm's rules send everyone out. When the time comes, if you meet Yu Haoran, ask him to escort you out of the Hungduan mountain range. Then, use a special jade talisman to inform the family's powerhouses to come and pick you up." "Aunt Lee, what about you?" Yuling asked softly as she looked at Aunt Lee, who seemed to be entrusting her with her last words. "Yuling, you're an extremely smart child. You should know that the Black Python will never let me and Brother Zheng go," Bailey said firmly as she reached out to tidy up the messy hair on Yuling's forehead. "So, I've already contacted Brother Zheng through the communication jade talisman. We've decided that the two of us will stall the Black Python until you can leave the secret realm. Ani Lee, can't we find a place to hide and wait for the Green Flame's secret realm to close?" Yuling begged bitterly without taking the storage ring from Ani Lee. Bailey shook her head and explained with a wry smile. If it were any other exotic beast, it might be possible to avoid it. However, for that Black Python, there's no way it can escape from its pursuit in the Azure domain, where there isn't much space. Then, she put away the bitter smile on her face and solemnly instructed, "Yuling, you should know how important the treasures in this storage ring are to the family. As long as you can give it to the family, Aunt Lee's sacrifice will be worth it. Let's go." Seeing that Yuling was going to continue persuading her, Bailey directly mobilized the power of laws and forcefully sent Yuling to a dense forest 100 miles away. Then, she swallowed several top-notch healing pills and turned around to return the way she came. She planned to help the powerhouse with the surname Zheng to deal with the terrifying Black Python. After using almost half a month's time, he finally refined the enormous energy in the ancestral witch's body with the help of the bloodline inheritance's cultivation method and completely recovered his original height. "Thaling, how much time did I spend in total?" Yu Haoran asked the Thaling who was guarding outside the time-accelerated space. 12 days have passed in the time-accelerated space. 7 minutes have passed in the outside world. The Thaling gave an accurate number after a brief calculation. "Then I'll continue cultivating for a while." Only 7 minutes had passed in the outside world. After hearing the time Thaling gave him to prepare, Yu Haoran planned to continue using the time-accelerated space to comprehend the martial techniques in the bloodline inheritance and raise his combat strength. "All right." In response, the Thaling nodded in agreement. At the same time, he began to try to use his divine sense to leave the victor to check the situation outside. Due to the special encounter in the Sorcerer God space, Thaling was very cautious at first. He only used his divine sense to slowly penetrate the victor. When he sensed that there was no force suppressing his divine sense in the outside world, he was relieved and boldly spread his divine sense to check the situation in the green region. However, as soon as he spread his divine sense, he immediately saw Yuling, who was wearing a long white dress and had a sorrowful expression, barging into the dense forest. Originally, Thaling did not want to bother with Yuling. However, when he sensed Yuling's sorrowful mood and heard her constantly thinking about Yu Haoran, he had no choice but to wake Yu Haoran up. After hearing Thaling mention Yuling's current state, Yu Haoran could not help but frown. According to Elder Zhang, although the Green Flame Mystery Land was filled with danger, there were not many dangers that could threaten a quasi-martial honorable. In that case, why would Yuling be alone in the dense forest? When he thought of this, Yu Haoran decided to leave the victor for the time being. After he figured out what was going on in the green region, he would decide whether to continue using his time acceleration ability to comprehend the powerful martial arts inherited from his bloodline. After his divine sense touched the mark and left the victor, Yu Haoran immediately spread his divine sense. Soon, he found Yuling, who was crying. Although his divine sense was fine, flying in the air required soul power and origin power. Since he had lost his Dantian and origin power, he had no choice but to run in search of Yuling. Yu Haoran, According to the memories left behind by the previous Thaling, it seems that ancestral sorcerers who maintain a normal body shape can fly. Right? Thaling asked curiously as he watched Yu Haoran run in search of Yuling. I know, but I haven't had the time to cultivate it yet. Yu Haoran replied gloomily as he ran. Fortunately, even if he maintained a normal height, the ancestral sorcerer's special physique allowed him to run as fast as a top-notch martial arts technique. 9 minutes later, Yu Haoran saw Yuling, who was in a daze, standing under a tree. Less than 5 meters away from her, a rank 6 king-level Gale Wolf, who was known as the Jungle Killer, was staring at her, waiting for the best opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Be careful, Yuling. Perhaps it had sensed that Yuling was in a daze and knew that it was the best opportunity to launch a sneak attack, so the Gale Wolf suddenly stomped its hind legs and pounced on Yuling. After hearing Yu Haoran's warning, Yuling quickly regained her senses. Before she could even smile, the Gale Wolf had already pounced on her, and her face turned pale with fright. Chapter 907. Green Flame, Secret Realm, Azure Region. Looking at the Gale Wolf that had been knocked unconscious by the Rui Bell and thinking about how she had almost died under its sneak attack, Yuling was burning with rage. She immediately took out her natal sword and cut off the Gale Wolf's head. Then, she turned around and looked at Yu Haoran. She was so emotional that she couldn't help but tear up. Yuling, why are you here alone? Yu Haoran asked as he put away the Rui Bell and walked towards Yuling. Yu Haoran, where have you been all this time? She couldn't help but complain when she thought about how Aunt Li and Senior Zheng had been searching for Yu Haoran, hoping that he could help them kill the Black Python. However, they still couldn't find him even after searching for 6 days. There was an accident. I went to a special place. Yu Haoran casually found an excuse and continued asking. Yuling, you still haven't told me why you're here alone. Where's your Aunt Li? Yu Haoran, quick, go and save my Aunt Li. Yu Haoran's further questioning made Yuling suddenly think of Aunt Li, who had gone back to delay the Black Python. She hurriedly tried to save her. Yuling, don't be anxious. Hurry up and tell me what happened. Yu Haoran stretched out his hand and pressed on Yuling's shoulder. He shook her vigorously as he reminded her. Yuling took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. Then, she quickly recounted what had happened after they entered the Azure region. It turned out that Bai Li and Yuling had directly appeared in the inner region of the Azure region through the suction force of the cave. Compared to the outer region, where there were many treasures, the inner region had countless top-notch treasures. This allowed Bai Li, Yuling, and Senior Zheng, who had entered the inner region, to reap a bountiful harvest. Unfortunately, the inner region had only been open for a day. Bai Li, Yuling, Senior Zheng, and their juniors had been forcefully teleported out of the inner region and appeared in the outer region of the Azure region. According to Bai Li's original plan, since she had already accomplished her goal of entering the Azure region, she could use the remaining 8 days to properly nurture Yuling and train her combat skills. However, while searching for exotic beasts suitable for training in the Azure region, Bai Li discovered that the exotic beasts in the Azure region were abnormally strong. Moreover, on the 3rd day after the secret realm opened, a 1,000-meter-long black python that had just passed the body tribulation appeared in the Azure region. If it weren't for the fact that both Bai Li and the Zheng expert had comprehended the power of laws that increased their speed, they would have died under the attack of the 1,000-meter-long black python. Unfortunately, most of the hundreds of martial kings, martial emperors, and martial saints who had entered the Azure domain had died in the encirclement of the Azure domain's beasts and the bloody mouth of the 1,000-meter-long black python. Yu Haoran did not pay too much attention to what had happened to Bai Li and the Zheng expert, nor did he care why so many powerful exotic beasts had appeared in the Azure region. At this moment, his true attention was focused on the time period that Yuling had just mentioned. Yuling, you said that 8 days have already passed since the Azure Flame's secret realm opened, right? Yu Haoran asked with a grave expression. Yes. Yuling confirmed with a nod. Thaling, what's going on? Yu Haoran immediately asked the Thaling in his mind. According to his calculations in the sorcerer god's space, less than a day had passed. How could 8 days have passed in the Azure Flame Secret Realm? If the Azure Flame Secret Realm had really been open for 8 days, then he had to make the best use of his remaining time to search for enlightenment stones that could increase his comprehension, spiritual medicine that could strengthen his soul, and other treasures that he needed. The Sorcerer God space that the 12 ancestral sorcerers cast together probably contains an auxiliary power of laws related to the law of time, which slowed down the flow of time in the Sorcerer God space by several times. Combining the corpses of the ancestral sorcerers and exotic beasts at the edge of the battlefield in the Sorcerer God space, as well as his own understanding of the law of time, Thowling gave his own conclusion. Thowling's conclusion immediately made Yu Howren feel a sense of urgency. He quickly asked about the whereabouts of Bai Li and the Black Python. He planned to get rid of the Black Python as soon as possible so that he could find the treasures that he urgently needed. Yu Howren, I don't know the exact location. I only know that Aunt Li went in that direction. Hearing Yu Howren asking about the whereabouts of Aunt Li and the Black Python, Yuling quickly pointed out the direction. Yuling, let me use a secret technique to check. Yu Howren gestured to Yuling to wait for a moment. He quickly closed his eyes and gestured to Thowling to use his peak 9th grade martial honorable divine sense to locate Bai Li and the Black Python as soon as possible. At the same time, he immediately called for the second victor. Brother Ran merge. Seeing the second doppelganger in his mind, Yu Howren immediately reminded him. Nodding his head, the second doppelganger directly merged with his physical body through the divine sense in his mind. Yu Howren, Bai Li, and the expert surnamed Zheng are fighting with a black python that has gone through the body tribulation in a valley 3,000 miles to the southeast. However, the outcome is not optimistic. After Yu Howren completely merged with his second doppelganger, Thowling, who had used his divine sense to track down Bai Li and the black python, also happened to find the exact location of Bai Li and the black python. After merging with his second doppelganger, he was able to use the second doppelganger's Dantian and origin energy. Yu Howren turned his head and reminded Yuling. Then, he shot into the sky and headed straight for the valley 3,000 miles away. Third brother Zheng. It looks like we won't be able to escape today. Bai Li, who had just been swept by the black python's giant tail, said to the expert surnamed Zheng, who was also heavily injured and had a weak aura. A few days ago, they had been able to use the power of laws to increase their speed to fight with the black python because the black python had just gone through the body tribulation. It had not completely adapted to its strength after breaking through, so the difference in strength between them was not that great. Now, after a few days of consolidation and familiarization, the black python had completely grasped its strength after breaking through. Its strength had increased by at least 10 times. This gradually evened out their advantage in speed, so they were now at a complete disadvantage. That's right. The expert surnamed Zheng replied with a bitter smile as he looked at the black python that had raised its head. There was not a shred of emotion in its icy eyes. It would be great if Grandmaster you could appear. After that, the expert surnamed Zheng could not help but beg when he thought of Yu Howren, who had easily killed Shen Aoyin. Third brother Zheng, don't think too much about it. We've basically searched the entire Azure region over the past few days, but we haven't found Grandmaster Yu's figure. When she heard the expert surnamed Zheng mention Yu Howren, Bai Li also felt a sliver of hope rise in her heart. However, she knew even more clearly that it was impossible. I think that as the first person to enter the secret realm through the suction force of the cave, Grandmaster, you should appear somewhere else in the secret realm, a place that neither you nor I can find. Chapter 908. Green Flame, Secret Realm, Green Region. Ever since the day I stepped onto the path of martial cultivation, I've been prepared to die at any time. Faced with the black python's cold question, the Zheng powerhouse raised his head and replied fearlessly. However, a trace of doubt soon appeared on his face. However, according to our understanding of the Green Flame Secret Realm, there shouldn't be so many level 4 and level 5 beasts in the Green region. It's even more impossible for a level 4-peak saint like you to appear. Then, can you tell me where you're from? Looking coldly at the Zheng powerhouse, a trace of hatred flashed across the black python's icy eyes as he replied, "The Hungduan Mountains." I understand now. After hearing the black python's reply, the Zheng powerhouse finally understood why so many beasts had suddenly appeared in the green region. He also finally understood why these beasts were crazily slaughtering human ancient martial art practitioners. It turned out that they were taking revenge. They were taking advantage of the secret realm's completely sealed environment to take revenge on the countless years of human ancient martial art practitioners slaughtering the beasts in the Hungduan Mountains. However, after hearing the black python's true origin, Bai Li's originally pale face instantly lost all color. If the beasts in the Hungduan Mountains were taking revenge on human ancient martial art practitioners, then the Holy Horse Peak outside the Green Flame's secret realm would definitely be surrounded by a large number of beasts. After all, the Hungduan Mountains was within the human sphere of influence. A small-scale conflict would not have any effect. However, using the opening of the secret realm as an opportunity to encircle and annihilate human ancient martial art practitioners on a large scale was a blatant provocation to the major forces of the Tianxian continent. If news of this leaked out, the Emperor Qin's kingdom would definitely gather the powerhouses of the various forces in the southern region to work together to annihilate all the beasts in the Hungduan Mountains. Therefore, the news of the quasi-venerable level beasts in the Hungduan Mountains definitely could not be allowed to leak out. If things were really as she guessed, then even Yu Ling, who had persevered until the secret realm closed, would probably not be able to escape the encirclement of countless beasts outside the secret realm. Thinking of this, Bai Li, who had originally planned to give up, gritted her teeth and took out a 3-colored pill from her storage ring, intending to swallow it. Bai Li, what are you doing? Before giving up on resisting, the Zheng expert planned to take a look at Bai Li. He wanted to see if this woman who was about to face death with him also planned to give up on resisting like him. He happened to see the 3-colored pill that she had just taken out, and his expression suddenly changed as he asked. The Trisol pill came from the Southern Territory's 5-poison sect, and it was a medicinal pill that allowed one's strength to rise explosively for a short period of time at the cost of one's soul. The eternal death of the soul was different from the scattering of the soul. Dispersing one's soul only represented the death of one's life. The soul that had dissipated between heaven and earth could be recondensed and reborn. Perhaps he could become a martial god in the future and awaken the memories of his previous life. However, if one's soul passed away, it would disappear forever. Life would not be continued. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, no one would be willing to sacrifice their soul in exchange for temporary power. A hint of panic flashed through the black python's cold eyes when it noticed the 3-soul pill in Bai Li's hand. With Bai Li's quasi-martial exalted cultivation, the strength she obtained by sacrificing her soul for eternity was enough for her to possess the strength of a second tribulation quasi-martial exalted. Therefore, in its panic, the black python instinctively tried to stop Bai Li from swallowing the 3-soul pill. Unfortunately, it was too late. This was because Bai Li had swallowed the 3-soul pill when it was already at her mouth. "Senior Bai Li, please stop." However, at this moment, a sudden shout came from outside the valley. Fortunately, as a woman who had been raised with noble etiquette since she was young, Bai Li's method of swallowing the 3-soul pill was to pinch the pill between her fingers and put it into her mouth. Therefore, when she heard the familiar voice, her fingers, which were about to loosen their grip on the 3-soul pill, held it tightly and immediately withdrew her hand. Bai Li's action of withdrawing the 3-soul pill caused the black python, which was about to stop her, to immediately stop pouncing forward. Then, it raised its head again and looked at Yu Haoran, who was quickly charging into the mountain range. A hint of disdain flashed through the icy python's eyes. "Grandmaster Yu, you're finally here." The Zheng powerhouse, who had escaped death, shouted excitedly. Bai Li's face, which was as pale as a sheet of paper, gradually regained some color with Yu Haoran's arrival. Yu Haoran nodded at Bai Li and the Zheng powerhouse. Then, he looked at the 1,000-meter-long black python. The black python, which was also paying attention to Yu Haoran, had a hint of doubt in its icy eyes. This was because it didn't know why two quasi-martial exalts would be so excited and trust the arrival of a martial emperor ant. Hengduan Mountain Range. So you're a quasi-martial exalted beast from the depths of the Hengduan Mountain Range. The black python scent was exactly the same as the scent of the exotic beasts he had killed in the Hengduan Mountain Range. Therefore, he didn't need to think too much about it. He finally understood why the cultivators of the Azure region would be surrounded and attacked by a large number of high-level exotic beasts. Fowling's divine sense scanned the black python. After understanding the terrifying strength the black python possessed, he suggested, Yu Haoran, use the possession technique. There's no rush. I want to use my ancestral witch body to fight it first. After rejecting Fowling's suggestion to use the possession technique, Yu Haoran indicated for his second clone to end the fusion and return to his sea of consciousness. At the same time, he recovered his ancestral witch body, which was at the beginning of the second-grade martial emperor realm. With the help of Victor's ability to accelerate time, he successfully recovered his original height. At the same time, the abundant spiritual energy in Victor also allowed his physical body to successfully advance to the second-grade martial emperor realm. Seeing his body quickly grow taller and taller than its head, a hint of seriousness flashed in the black python's icy eyes. This was because it discovered that the human before was rapidly growing taller, and at the same time, his body was emitting a unique aura. This unique aura caused the black dragon bloodline in its body to faintly show signs of being suppressed. When Yu Haoran's height exceeded 700 meters, the suppression completely turned into suppression. The black dragon bloodline that had spent so much effort to purify to 30% was directly suppressed to 20% of its strength. Looking up at Yu Haoran, it was like a giant that could hold up the sky. The black python tried its best to use its body to support its head, but in the end, it only reached the other party's shoulder. Human, who are you? The black python looked coldly at Yu Haoran and asked in a serious tone. Yu Haoran from the great Emperor Qin Kingdom. Yu Haoran told the truth. Human, don't pretend to be confused. The black python asked somewhat angrily as a cold aura directly approached Yu Haoran. You should know what this noble one asked just now. Among the dragon clan in ancient times, the black dragon belonged to the dragon clan with the lowest status. It was a bastard that was not recognized by all the divine dragons. Yu Haoran extended his giant palm and waved it. The cold aura that was approaching him was directly blown away. Then, he replied contemptuously. Chapter 909. Green Flame, Secret Realm, Green Region. Boy, you're courting death. Yu Haoran's contemptuous humiliation caused the black python to roar with murderous intent. Subsequently, the python's head and tail coiled around Yu Haoran, intending to use its terrifying entanglement to wrap him to death. In the face of the oncoming black python, Yu Haoran did not dodge or resist. Instead, he opened his arms and allowed it to wrap around him. Master, you quickly dodge. This black python has a terrifying entanglement that can break a celestial device of the sage realm. Seeing Yu Haoran allow the black python to wrap around him, the expert surnamed Zheng, who had personally experienced the power of entanglement, could not help but remind him loudly. Chuckling and shaking his head at the expert surnamed Zheng, Yu Haoran put away his smile and began to fully stimulate the defense of the wizard's body. The reason why he took the risk of letting the black python wrap around him was that when he was practicing the bloodline inheritance of the wizard, he found that the wizard's body transformed by the wizard origin fruit was not perfect. Some subtle features still retained the original physical characteristics. Although it would not affect his cultivation in a short time, it would definitely become an obstacle for him to climb to a higher realm with the improvement of his realm and strength. Therefore, He intended to use the black python's terrifying entanglement to further stimulate the remaining energy of the wizard origin fruit in his body and further perfect the wizard's body. The 1,000-meter-long python quickly wrapped around Howard from his neck to his thighs and began to shrink. Little black python, your strength is too weak. Haven't you eaten yet? As the python's body began to shrink, a strong sense of suffocation and pain from his body made the wizard's body instinctively resist. Carefully feeling the entanglement formed by the black python, Howard could not help but tease it when he found that it could not stimulate the remaining energy of the wizard origin fruit in his body. Sizzle. Howard's casual teasing made the black python's bestial nature immediately erupt. With a hiss, it began to use the powerful physical strength it had gained after passing the body tribulation, intending to grind Howard into minced meat. As the black python began to use its true strength, an even more intense suffocation and pain made Howard's face turn red. At the same time, the remaining witchcraft origin fruit's energy in his body was forced out bit by bit, and it actively searched for flaws that could not withstand the binding force. In other words, the fine meridians and blood vessels that still retained the characteristics of the original constitution. Comfortable. As the ancestral witch physique continued to improve, the suffocation and pain gradually weakened. But on the other hand, as the feeling of suffocation and intense pain weakened, the effect on the body's potential also began to weaken. Howard could feel that there was still a trace of hidden danger in his body. He could only pretend to enjoy it and further agitate the black python. You forced me to do this, the black python threatened coldly. Originally, as a quasi-venerable exotic beast that had passed the body tribulation, the black python had many ways to attack. Binding was just one of them. Under normal circumstances, if the binding method did not work, then it could use the complete power of laws to attack. It could also use the powerful martial techniques inherited from its bloodline. But Howard's moans of enjoyment completely aroused the black python's pride as a quasi-venerable exotic beast. At this moment, it wanted to defeat its opponent through binding no matter what to show its dignity as a quasi-venerable exotic beast. The combination of soul power and demonic power with the complete power of laws began to increase the binding force of the python's body. Howard, who had a look of enjoyment on his face, could not help but groan in pain. Although it was painful, the sudden increase in binding force directly forced the ancestral witch physique to begin to unleash its true potential. It also allowed the last trace of witchcraft origin fruit's energy hidden in the body to quickly separate, integrate, and eliminate the last trace of hidden danger in the body. Howard carefully felt the ancestral witch physique that had been improved by the witchcraft origin fruit. At the same time, an incomparably powerful force made him howl in excitement, and at the same time, he began to resist the black python's binding force. In an instant, the black python's expression changed as it was forcefully supported by the strength of Howard's physical body. But its pride and dignity did not allow it to think of using other methods to deal with Howard. Since the combination of soul power and demonic power with the complete power of laws did not work, then I will directly use the ancient ancestors' black dragon bloodline. The black python was suppressed by the ancestral witch's aura and could only use 20% of its black dragon bloodline. After completely activating the power of its bloodline, the binding force instantly increased by more than 30 times. This also caused Howard, who had just relied on the perfect ancestral witch physique to unleash a powerful supporting force, to immediately suffer the counterattack of the binding force. He was tightly bound. Feeling the binding force increase by more than 30 times, the suffocation of being unable to breathe, and the intense pain that pierced into his heart, Howard's expression could not help but change. Howard's left foot that could barely move suddenly stomped on the ground, and he further activated the strength of the ancestral witch physique. But compared to the binding force that had increased by more than 30 times, the strength of his physique that had increased by more than 30 times was like pouring a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. You Howren, this black python has already activated the bloodline power of its ancestral witch physique. With your current strength and level, you still can't get rid of the binding force. Seeing that you Howren was in danger and still did not ask for help from him, Thowling could only take the initiative to remind him. So, it's best to immediately use the possession technique, and let me use the law of the fall of flowers to deal with it. As the binding force grew stronger, the bones in his body began to emit a grinding sound. Yu Howren knew that the ancestral witch physique would not be able to deal with the black python that had passed through the body calamity and had activated the bloodline power of its ancestral witch physique. He could only nod and agree to Thowling's suggestion. However, just as Thowling was about to use the possession technique, a powerful force suddenly exploded from the ancestral witch physique that had been forced to its limit, allowing Yu Howren to barely resist the black python's body that was constantly shrinking. In less than 2 seconds, a second powerful force exploded from his body, causing the strength of his ancestral witch physique to gradually exceed the binding force that was shrinking. It gradually began to support the python's body. Sensing the two powerful forces erupting from Yu Howren's body one after another, the proud black python did not change its mind about attacking. Instead, it started to overdraw on its inherited black dragon bloodline, continuing to increase its coiling and contracting power. However, when a third powerful force exploded from Yu Howren's body, the python's body that was tightly wrapped around Yu Howren's body was immediately stretched open. At the same time, Yu Howren was controlled by his consciousness that was constantly erupting with power. The moment the python's body was stretched open, Yu Howren stretched out 2 wide palms and grabbed the head and tail of the black python. Then he forcefully pulled. Sizzle. As a quasi-venerable beast that had passed through the body calamity, the black python not only had a terrifying binding force that could directly crush a sage magic weapon, but its body's defense was also extremely strong. Chapter 9-10. Green Flame's Secret Realm, Green Region. While roaring in pain, the black python knew that it had made a mistake of being arrogant. In the face of this human with an unknown special constitution, it was definitely not a wise move to engage in a head-on physical confrontation with him. Therefore, the black python decided to change its attack method. However, at this moment, a fourth powerful force exploded from Yu Howren's body. The 4 powerful forces that exploded from his body made Yu Howren feel that his ancestral witch body was about to explode. He couldn't help but roar at the sky and pull the python's body with both hands. Puff! Accompanied by 2 spurts of blood, the 1,000-meter-long black python was torn in half. As a quasi-venerable beast that had passed the body calamity, the black python had a very strong vitality. Although it suffered an unimaginable injury when its body was suddenly torn in half, it didn't directly kill it. When it used its long forked tongue to attack and forced Yu Howren to let go of his defense, the python's head carried the python's upper body and fled into the depths of the green region. Yu Howren didn't chase after it. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and started to examine the reason why the 4 powerful forces exploded from his body. Looking at Yu Howren, who was still more than 700 meters tall, Bai Li and the Zheng expert looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. In addition to the shock, there was also a trace of hesitation in Bai Li's eyes. She stopped Yu Ling from pursuing Yu Howren, not because Yu Howren wasn't outstanding enough, but because he was from a small family. As a disciple of an inherited family, Bai Li had a sense of superiority in her bones. She looked down on people who weren't from the inherited family. Even if Yu Howren had outstanding potential, even if his alchemy and formation cultivation had reached the peak of the Grandmaster level. However, in Bai Li's eyes, he was still a lowly commoner. However, Yu Howren had used a secret technique to enlarge his body. Not only was he able to resist the black python's entanglement that was enhanced by the bloodline of the ancient divine beast, the black dragon, he was also able to tear the black python's body apart. This made her think differently. Beggars were beggars. If this lowly commoner had the potential to become a dragon, then he would be worthy of a descendant who had inherited the bloodline of the clan. Antly, are you all right? Just as Bai Li was considering whether she should allow Yuling to pursue Yu Haoran, she suddenly heard Yuling's concerned voice. In order to get rid of the black python as quickly as possible and make use of the remaining time, he had to search for the treasures he desperately needed in the Azure domain. Yu Haoran had rushed to the mountain valley without Yuling. He had even forgotten to tell her the exact route. As a result, Yuling had to spend a little more time to reach the valley. Bai Li lifted her head to look at Yu Haoran, who was inspecting his own condition, and explained gratefully, "It's all thanks to the Grandmaster's rescue that our lives are no longer in danger." As expected, it was because of Yu Haoran. After hearing Bai Li's words of gratitude, Yuling quickly turned to look at Yu Haoran. She was then stunned by his enormous body. "Yuling, this is the secret technique that Grandmaster Yu used to deal with the black python," Bai Li instinctively explained to Yu Haoran when she saw the stunned Yuling. The law of time's scars can easily break down and transform into a quasi-martial venerable. The law of blossom's curtains can make quasi-martial venerable experts who have passed through the soul calamity die quickly. Transforming into a gigantic body that's several hundred meters tall can even tear apart the body of a quasi-martial venerable beast who has passed through the body calamity. Yuling lifted her head to look at Yu Haoran, who was sitting cross-legged with his legs crossed, and muttered to herself with an astonished expression. Then, she turned around and looked directly at Bai Li. "Aunt Li, does Yu Haoran still belong to the younger generation?" "Little girl Yuling. Actually, when Grandmaster Yu revealed his peak alchemy Grandmaster realm, he already didn't belong to the younger generation." Faced with Yuling's question, Bai Li couldn't help but fall into deep thought. However, the cultivator with the surname Zheng, who was more simple-minded, took the initiative to answer for her. "Now, Grandmaster Yu, who can use 2 laws and a secret transformation technique, is probably already a powerhouse of our generation." The cultivator with the surname Zheng turned to look at Yu Haoran and couldn't help but sigh emotionally. There will always be new talents in every generation. Each of them will lead the way for thousands of years. Yu Haoran, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, didn't hear the cultivator with the surname Zheng's evaluation of him earlier. This was because the changes that were happening in his body had caused him to fall into a state of wild joy. "Yu Haoran, what happened just now?" Sensing the wild joy in Yu Haoran's emotions, Thaling, who knew the reason why the 4 powerful energies had suddenly erupted in his body earlier, could not help but ask. "Thaling, the 4 energies that erupted in my body earlier were remnants of the instinctive memories of the 4 ancient ancestral shamans that fused into my body on the battlefield in the wizard god space back then." After taking a deep breath and suppressing his wild joy, Yu Haoran explained in detail. Originally, these energies were the foundation that maintained the instinctive memories of the ancestral shamans. If I hadn't discovered it, not only would these energies gradually disappear, but the memories that belong to the ancestral shamans would also slowly dissipate. The reason why the energies of the 4 ancestral shamans erupted just now was because my ancestral shaman's physical body was in mortal danger. It was also because the black python had activated the bloodline of the ancient divine beast, the black dragon, which had aroused the instinctive fury of the 12 ancient ancestral shamans. Yu Haoran, according to what you said, if you want to continue to activate the remaining 8 ancestral shamans' memories and energies, not only would the physical body of the ancestral shamans be in mortal danger, but you would also need a powerful ancient divine beast with the bloodline of the ancient divine beast to provoke the instinctive fury of the ancient ancestral shamans. After hearing Yu Haoran's explanation, Thaling was also overjoyed. At the same time, she began to think about the next training plan for him. That's right. Nodding his head, Yu Haoran's tone changed. The joy that he had just adjusted through his breathing instantly surged out again. The energies and memories that erupted from the ancient ancestral shamans were secondary. What really made me wild with joy was the memories of the ancestral shaman, with the strongest cultivation and strength among the 12 ancestral shamans. At this point, Yuhaoran suddenly changed the topic and asked, Thowling, do you know why the king of the 9 ancient divine beasts led an army to slaughter the entire shaman tribe? I don't know. Shaking his head, Thowling replied. According to the memories of the previous Thowling, the reason why the 9 ancient divine beasts killed the shaman tribe was because the existence of the shaman tribe might affect their position as the overlord. However, his experience in the wizard god space made him think that the 9 ancient divine beasts chose to kill the entire shaman tribe because they wanted to refine the ancestral star of the shaman tribe. However, Yuhaoran's serious interrogation showed that his and the previous Thowling speculations were wrong. That's because the ancestral sorcerer, who has the strongest cultivation and strength, has successfully opened up his Dantian and cultivated Yuanli. Yuhaoran clenched his fists tightly and said with a trembling voice due to his excitement. Chapter 911. Green Flame, Secret Realm, Green Region. After hearing Yuhaoran's explanation, Thowling's first reaction was disbelief. The reason why the ancestor of sorcerer was able to have a place in the ancient times when there were so many experts, and even threatened the position of the ancient divine beasts, was that they had the strongest physical body in the world. If they had the strongest physical body and could practice martial arts, then all living things would be under the rule of the ancestor of sorcerer, and even the danger of ancient times would be resolved by the ancestor of sorcerer. However, Yuhaoran obviously wouldn't joke about such things with him. Therefore, Thowling, who quickly calmed down after being shocked, began to think about the possibility of the ancestor of sorcerer practicing martial arts. Yuhaoran, how did the strongest ancestor of sorcerer successfully open up the Dantian? However, no matter how he thought, Thowling could not think of a way for the ancestor of sorcerer to open up the Dantian, so he could only ask Yuhaoran. Not only does it require a high level of comprehension, but it also requires the cooperation of 3 kinds of spiritual herbs. Yuhaoran replied with a smile. Which 3 kinds of spiritual herbs? Thowling hurriedly asked. As one of the top experts in the ancient times, the ancestor of sorcerer's comprehension was unquestionable. Therefore, Thowling wanted to know the 3 kinds of spiritual herbs that could assist in opening up the Dantian. 10th level channel grass, 10th level Kaiyang fruit, 10th level thorny flower. Yuhaoran said the origins of the 3 kinds of spiritual herbs that were needed to open up the Dantian. Hearing the 3 kinds of spiritual herbs that Yuhaoran gave, Thowling was suddenly stunned. If the 3 kinds of spiritual herbs needed to open up the ancestor of sorcerer's Dantian were the kind that was rarely seen in millions of years, or even tens of millions of years, Thowling could barely accept it. However, out of the 3 types of spiritual herbs that Yuhaoran had just listed, apart from the 10th level first grade meridian grass, which was considered slightly more precious, the remaining daybreak fruit and thorny flower were completely ordinary goods in the Tianxian continent. They were not even worth a 10th level first grade spirit stone. Yuhaoran, are you sure you are not joking? Thowling asked in disbelief, or in other words, he could not accept it. According to the records left in the ancestor of sorcerer's memory, it should be these 3 spiritual herbs. Thowling's doubt also made Yuhaoran replied was not very confident. No one of spiritual herbs were able to open up the ancestor of sorcerer's Dantian were spiritual herbs. However, no one would believe they could open up the Dantian in the body of sorcerer's spiritual herbs were too. Who could believe that they could open up Dantian? Yuhaoran, I remember that you obtained 3 10th grade meridian grasses and 5 10th grade Kaiyang fruits from the Law Enforcement Peak's treasury. He only needed to verify whether the memories left behind by the ancestor of sorcerer were real. Furthermore, with Yuhaoran's strength and his own methods, even if the 3 spiritual herbs were harmful, he would be able to neutralize them in time. When I used my spiritual sense to search for Bai Li and the Black Python, I discovered that there were several first-grade 10th level Dantian flowers at the entrance of this valley. Why don't you try it now and see if you can open up your Dantian? Although Yuhaoran was very tempted by Thaling's suggestion, he felt that it would be best for him to find a place to open up his dantian when he considered the fact that Bai Li and the Zheng expert were both by his side. There's no need. I will use my spiritual sense to set up a concealment formation that no one will be able to detect. You only need to open up your dantian at ease. Thaling instructed in an extremely domineering manner as he shook his head and rejected Yuhaoran's suggestion. All right. As he nodded in agreement to Thaling's instructions, Yuhaoran planned to ask the Zheng experts junior to pick the dantian flowers for him. However, he was surprised to see that Yuling had also arrived at the valley, so he directly asked her for help. Yuling, there are several first-grade, 10th-level dantian flowers at the entrance of the valley. Please help me get one. I need it urgently. I'll go right away. A secret technique that could directly tear apart the black python's body would definitely have a certain side effect. A first-grade 10th-level dantian flower might be the spiritual herb that could eliminate the side effect of the secret technique. Therefore, Yuling did not ask why he needed to pick the dantian flowers when she heard Yuhaoran's instructions. She directly flew towards the entrance of the valley. Master, are you all right? The Zheng expert asked with concern. I'm fine. I just need to rest for a while, and I'll be able to recover. Yuhaoran replied with a smile. The valley was not large, so Yuling quickly returned using her flight technique. She also used her Yuan Qi to wrap the first-grade 10th-level dantian flowers and delivered them to Yuhaoran. Thank you. Yuhaoran took the dantian flowers and reminded Thaling to immediately activate the concealing formation. He then took out the first-grade 10th-level meridian grass and the first-grade 10th-level dantian fruit from his storage ring. Then, he closed his eyes and began to carefully understand the process of using the 3 spiritual herbs to open up the dantian in the wizard ancestor's memory. It did not take long for Yuhaoran to memorize the whole process of opening up the dantian. Yuhaoran opened his eyes and reminded Thaling. After closing his eyes again, Yuhaoran directly mobilized the physical strength of the wizard ancestor and began to forcibly gather it at the dantian in his abdomen. When a large amount of physical strength had gathered at the dantian in his abdomen, relying on his tenacious willpower and the experience of opening up the dantian in the wizard ancestor's memory, he began to forcibly compress the large amount of physical strength gathered at the dantian. After spending nearly half an hour, a milky white ball of energy the size of a longan floated in his abdomen. Taking a deep breath, Yuhaoran allowed his emotions to completely calm down. Then he swallowed the meridian grass, the dantian fruit, and the dantian flowers into his body. When the 3 spiritual herbs began to take effect, his mind guided the medicinal strength into his abdomen and merged with the physical strength of the longan. Boom! As the black python was severely injured, the strange beast that had been crazily besieging the human warriors began to quietly lurk and wait for the opportunity to attack again. This caused the entire azure field to be extremely silent. Just as the medicinal strength of the 3 spiritual herbs merged with the physical strength of the longan, a deafening thunder suddenly sounded in the extremely silent azure field. Accompanied by the deafening thunder, Yuhaoran's abdomen gradually formed a suction force. At the beginning, the suction force only attracted the pure spiritual qi in the entire valley. However, as the suction force in his abdomen continued to increase, the range of the pure spiritual qi began to gradually expand until it finally affected the entire azure field. The source of the pure spiritual qi came from that valley. I think that the human powerhouse used the enlightenment when he fought with me to improve his strength by leaps and bounds. In a lake in the depths of the azure field, the black python that had escaped with half of its body was hiding at the bottom of the lake. Chapter 9:12. Green Flame, Secret Realm, Green Region. The black python's divine thought tracked the direction where the pure spiritual qi gathered. It was the valley where it had just fought with the young human. Immediately, a solemn expression appeared on its face. In my current state, I'm no match for that young human expert. Now, with the help of the enlightenment he gained from fighting with me, his strength has improved by leaps and bounds. I'm even less of a match for him. It seems that the plan to encircle and annihilate all the human warriors in the secret realm has failed. I hope that Elder Bai and Supreme Bear are prepared to encircle and annihilate them. They must not let any human warrior escape. After praying in its heart, the black python's head slowly sank to the bottom of the lake. It used the thick and pure spiritual chi at the bottom of the lake to heal its injuries while waiting for the secret realm to close. Without using divine thought to check, Thowling knew that Yu Haoran had successfully opened up his dantian just by looking at the crazy absorption of the pure spiritual chi. At this moment, Thowling was shocked that the most powerful wizard in ancient times could create a method to open up the dantian. At the same time, he was happy for Yu Haoran, who had successfully opened up his dantian and recovered his martial arts cultivation. Although Yu Haoran could also climb to the peak of martial arts with the cultivation of the wizard's body and become one of the top experts in the Tianxian continent, there was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. To become the one and only existence in the Tianxian continent, the martial arts cultivation was the right way. Now, not only did Yu Haoran possess the most powerful wizard's body, he also possessed the most monstrous martial arts potential. Thowling could already predict that the future overlord of the Tianxian continent would soon be Yu Haoran's seat. As the strong suction from his abdomen began to absorb the pure spiritual chi in the green region, the milky white energy floating in his abdomen began to shrink instead of growing bigger. When a milky white energy ball shrunk to the size of a grain of sand, it suddenly exploded silently. Countless milky white energy formed a new dantian in the original location of the destroyed dantian. Yu Haoran secretly heaved a sigh of relief as he felt the pure spirit energy transform and pour into his dantian. At the same time, a strong sense of surprise emerged in his heart, because just like Thowling, he also thought about the various advantages he had now. As the powerful gravitational force absorbed the pure spiritual energy of the Azure Domain, Yu Haoran's new dantian region began to rapidly increase his cultivation base. In a short 10 minutes, his cultivation had risen from the initial stage of martial disciple all the way to the peak of 9th grade martial king. In just a minute, the bottleneck of the complete martial king realm was easily broken, allowing him to successfully advance to the complete 10th grade martial king realm. Although he had not reached the limit of breaking through to the martial emperor realm, he was confident that he would be able to break through to the martial emperor realm with the help of the pure spiritual chi in the Azure Domain. However, there was less than half a day before the mystery realm closed, so he decided to give up on breaking through to the martial emperor realm. After all, he had reached a certain level of comprehension. As long as he had enough energy, he could break through to the martial emperor realm at any time. However, if the green flame mystery realm closed without any pattern, he did not know if he would have the chance to enter the mystery realm in the future. If the next time the green flame mystery realm opened was more than a few decades away, then with his various advantages, the treasures in the green flame mystery realm would not be of any use. Therefore, after asking for Thowling's permission, Yu Haoran simply consolidated his cultivation base after breaking through, and used the witch ancestor's cultivation method to restore his normal height. After that, he stopped cultivating and stood up. Seeing Yu Haoran stop cultivating and stand up, Master Zheng and Bai Li quickly stood up to congratulate him. "Congratulations, Master Yu, on breaking through to the martial emperor realm. Your strength has improved by leaps and bounds." "Thank you." After nodding at Bai Li and Master Zheng politely, Yu Haoran went straight to the point. "Senior Zheng, due to some special reasons, when I entered the Green Flame Mystery Realm, I was directly trapped in a special space. It was only when I met Yuling just now that I barely managed to escape. Now, I wonder if the Enlightenment Stones, 9 Tunes Holy Spirit Flower, would Dragon Ginseng and Soul Spiritual Fruit have fallen into the hands of others. After hearing Yu Haoran's explanation, Master Zheng could not help but glance at Bai Li. He could not help but admire her intelligence. Bai Li chuckled and nodded when she felt the gaze of the Zheng powerhouse. Master Zheng then looked at Yu Haoran and said, Master Yu Haoran, Master Yu Haoran, Master Yu, a total of 9 enlightenment stones appeared in the green domain. Other than Bai Li and I, who obtained 1 each, the remaining 7 enlightenment stones have all fallen into the hands of the Black Python. The 9 tunes Holy Spirit Flower and Wood Dragon Ginseng were also taken away by the Black Python. As for the soul spiritual fruit, I'm afraid it will only appear the moment the mystery realm closes. After hearing Master Zheng's explanation, Yu Haoran immediately instructed Thaling in his sea of consciousness. Thaling, use your divine telekinesis to the limit and find the whereabouts of the Black Python in the shortest time possible. Of the 4 treasures he needed, 3 were in the hands of the Black Python. Yu Haoran, who originally wanted to eliminate the source of trouble, now had an additional reason to immediately hunt it down. Yu Haoran, that Black Python is currently hiding in a lake about 27,300 kilometers southeast of the valley. When Master Zheng mentioned that the Enlightenment Stones had fallen into the hands of the Black Python, Thaling had already begun to use his divine telekinesis to track it down. Without any restrictions on his divine telekinesis, Thaling's divine telekinesis could almost cover the entire green domain. Therefore, he found the hiding place of the Black Python in the shortest time possible. Senior Zheng, Senior Bai, although that Black Python was severely injured by me due to its carelessness, it has the bloodline of the Black Dragon in its body. As long as it has enough pure spirit qi, it can recover in a very short time. Therefore, to eliminate the source of trouble, I need to eliminate the source of trouble. I'll go after that Black Python now. Seeing that Thaling had successfully locked onto the hiding place of the Black Python, Yu Haoran, who was afraid that undue delay would lead to more trouble, immediately said goodbye. Just as Yu Haoran was about to go after the Black Python, Bai Li hurriedly urged him to stay. Grandmaster Yu, please wait for a moment. Senior Bai, is there anything else? Yu Haoran felt very awkward addressing a woman who was about the same age as his mother. Therefore, he did not care whether Bai Li agreed or not, and continued to address her as senior according to his own thoughts. Grandmaster Yu, killing the severely injured Black Python is a small matter. The most important thing is how we can leave the Hengduan mountain range alive. After that, Bai Li explained in detail her speculations about the strange beasts surrounding the human ancient martial art practitioners. Chapter 9:13. Green Flame Secret Realm, Green Region. Since ancient times, there had been countless killings and battles between humans and beasts in order to fight for living space and to obtain more cultivation resources. However, as time passed, humans, as the wisest of all creatures, gradually gained the upper hand in the battle for living space and cultivation resources, regardless of their cultivation talent and comprehension, or their own superior intelligence. In the end, countless beasts were forced to either retreat into the mountains, become the pet beasts of human martial artists, or be buried in the wilderness. However, the hatred accumulated over countless years and the threat of the beast's long lifespan made many knowledgeable human beings want to exterminate the beast completely to eliminate any hidden dangers. This forced all the beasts in the Tianxian continent to work together to fight against the threat of extinction. After that, a bloody battle that lasted almost 100 years broke out between the two sides. During that time, countless humans and beasts died. This was the most famous race defense war in modern times. After 100 years of bloody battle, although almost 70% of the beasts in the Tianxian continent were exterminated, the number of human martial artists was reduced by almost half. The 2 largest races in the Tianxian continent were in danger of being exterminated because of the race defense war. As the guardian family of the Tianxian continent, they had no choice but to step in and suppress them. In the end, not only did they stop the race defense war, but they also made the beasts and humans sign a treaty of peaceful coexistence. According to the Treaty of Peaceful Coexistence, regardless of whether it was humans living in the beast's territory or beasts living in the humans' territory, they were only allowed to fight on a small scale. No large-scale encirclement or massacre was allowed. If there was a large-scale encirclement or massacre, the party being attacked would have the ability to gather quasi-martial venerable powerhouses to completely kill all the beasts or humans that ruled the area. This was the famous law of peaceful coexistence in the Tianxian continent. The reason why the 100 Gate could survive for thousands of years in the mountains where beasts roamed freely was because of the law of peaceful coexistence. It was a deterrent to the high-level beasts in the mountains. Senior Bai, Senior Zheng, how much do you know about the beasts in the Hengduan Mountains? The beasts in the Hengduan Mountains openly violated the law of peaceful coexistence. They planned to use the opening of the Green Flame's secret realm to encircle and annihilate the humans who entered the secret realm. This meant that they had an indelible hatred for humans, and, at the same time, they had the strength to kill all the humans who entered the mountain range. Therefore, if they wanted to successfully break out of the Hengduan mountain range after the Green Flame's secret realm closed, they would need to understand the strength of the strange beasts that were blocking the St. Horse Peak. Master you, no matter if it's my Bai clan or third brother Zhangzheng clan, we all come from the central region. We don't know much about the southern region's Hengduan mountain range. Bai Li replied apologetically to Yu Haoran's question. Bai Li's explanation and the Zheng expert's nod of agreement made Yu Haoran frown involuntarily. Before understanding the true strength of the other party, any plan to break out of the encirclement could be changed. The consequences of such an unforeseen event could lead to their deaths in the Hengduan mountain range. Then, how could they ensure that there wouldn't be any unforeseen events during the breakout, or rather, reduce the consequences of unforeseen events? Firstly, he needed to understand the number and strength of the top exotic beasts in the entire Hengduan mountain range. Secondly, they needed to increase their strength to break through the encirclement. Yu Haoran looked at Bai Li and asked when he thought of this. Senior Bai, according to Senior Zhang's introduction of the secret realm, it seems like the barrier between the green and fire regions will automatically disappear before the Green Flame's secret realm closes, and the two regions will completely merge. That's right. Bai Li nodded and confirmed Elder Zhang's introduction of the Green Flame secret realm. Senior Bai, Senior Zheng, I would like to trouble the two of you to do something for me, Yu Haoran requested with cupped fists after receiving Bai Li's confirmation. Master Yu, you don't have to be so courteous. Feel free to tell us what you need. Elder Zhang and Bai Li hurriedly waved their hands in response to Yu Haoran's request. I hope that the two of you can hurry to the border between the green and fire regions as soon as possible and find Senior Zhang and Senior Zheng immediately before the two regions merge. Then, I will teach the four of you a formation. Time was of the essence, so Yu Haoran didn't decline modestly and directly instructed. When the time comes, we'll use this formation to break out of the encirclement. All right, no problem. Bai Li and Elder Zhang hurriedly nodded in agreement with Yu Haoran's idea of gathering the four quasi-martial honorables in the secret realm and then using the formation to gather their strongest power. Yu Haoran, what do you plan to do next? He only asked Aunt Li and Senior Zheng to rush to the border between the two regions without explaining what he was going to do. This made Yuling want to know if she could stay with Yu Haoran. In order to ensure the success of breaking out of the encirclement, I have to get rid of all the hidden dangers before the Green Flame secret realm closes. Yu Haoran said with a murderous look as he raised his head and looked in the direction where the black python was hiding. Seniors, I'll take my leave. Yu Haoran cupped his fists and immediately soared into the sky, heading straight for the lake in the depths of the green region. Yuling, let's go. Bai Li sighed softly and reminded Yuling when she saw that she was in a daze. All right, since they were going to part ways, even if he couldn't bring her along, he should at least bid her farewell. However, Yu Haoran's decision to ignore her made Yuling feel even more wronged as she nodded her head. She then followed by Li and Elder Zhang to the border between the two regions. Thaling, once you find the black python, immediately use the possession technique. Yu Haoran instructed Thaling in his mind when they were 100 miles away from the lake where the black python was hiding. I know. Thaling nodded in agreement. He knew that Yu Haoran wanted to use the possession technique to make use of the law of time scars to kill the black python in the shortest amount of time. He also wanted to understand the true situation in the Hengduan mountain range through the python's life experiences. Something's not right. Thaling could not help but warn him when they arrived in front of the lake where the black python was hiding. Thaling, what's wrong? After hearing Thaling's warning, Yu Haoran immediately spread out his spiritual sense to investigate, but he did not discover anything strange. Why are there two powerful auras of exotic beasts at the bottom of the lake? Thaling was afraid that he had made a mistake in his judgment. He used his spiritual sense to check again and explain the reason for his surprise. Could it be that there's another quasi-venerable exotic beast besides the black python that entered the green region? Yu Haoran immediately speculated nervously. That's not right. Thaling shook his head to deny Yu Haoran's speculation and explain. Chapter 9:14. In the green region of the Green Flame Secret Realm, deliberately avoiding the severely injured black python meant that the other exotic beast at the bottom of the lake was not very strong. At least, it was not a powerful exotic beast of the quasi-venerable realm. Therefore, Yu Haoran did not deliberately ask about the other exotic beast. Instead, he signaled Thaling to quickly perform the possession technique so that he could kill the black python as soon as possible and understand the real situation in the Hengduan mountain range. Okay. While nodding in agreement with Yu Haoran's order, Thaling also wanted to further investigate the origin of the exotic beast. Because of the aura of the exotic beast, he felt a sense of familiarity. Therefore, he wanted to see if the exotic beast at the bottom of the lake was the legendary special exotic beast that could advance to that realm in the future. After Thaling finished performing the possession technique, Yu Haoran directly took out his purple cudgel. After it became thicker and longer, he suddenly hit the surface of the lake. As the power of the purple cudgel gradually seeped into the bottom of the lake, Yu Haoran loudly provoked the black python. Little black python, come out and die. The black python, who was devouring the pure spiritual chi at the bottom of the lake to heal its injuries, was shocked by the sudden power that seeped into its head, causing it to almost go mad. Then, Yu Haoran's provocation made it angry, resentful, hateful, and fearful. The complex and changeable emotions caused the black python to spit out a mouthful of blood. Its injuries that had just healed worsened again. Damn human, don't push me too far. The black python gnashed its teeth and roared through the lake water that was hundreds of meters deep. Little black python, I'm pushing you too far. What do you do about it? Yu Haoran said provocatively, as if he was asking for a beating. You can come out now and fight with me for 300 rounds. See how I can easily defeat you. Yu Haoran's smug face made the black python gnash its teeth in anger. If it wasn't for the fact that it was severely injured and could only display the strength of a 4th-level Sage Realm expert, how could it tolerate Yu Haoran's blatant provocation? However, the reality of the situation made it so that it could only curse in its heart. It did not dare to take the risk of leaving the bottom of the lake. Little black snake, as a powerful beast at the quasi-venerable realm, where is your dignity? Yu Haoran was a little disappointed when he saw that the black python was not angered by his provocation and was hiding at the bottom of the lake. However, he was not too anxious. This was because he was confident in his eloquence that had been honed countless times in his previous life. He believed that the black python would eventually not be able to stand his provocation and humiliation and would voluntarily come out to die. Little black snake, could it be that there's a problem with the ancestral bloodline in your body? You've only inherited the black dragon's cowardly personality, but you've lost the dragon bloodline's fearlessness. After waiting for 10 seconds, Yu Haoran saw that there was still no movement from the black python hiding at the bottom of the lake. He looked up to the sky and sighed, his tone full of disappointment. If that's the case, then you can continue to hide at the bottom of the lake and struggle at death's door. Then, let those who followed you into the green flame secret realm see that the king black python that they once worshipped is actually a pitiful and pathetic coward. Human, I'll fight you to the death. As a strange beast that inherited the ancient black dragon's bloodline, as a quasi-venerable king strange beast of the Hungduan mountain range, in the black python's consciousness, the ancestral bloodline and the respect of its subordinates were its reverse scale. Now, Yuhauran's naked humiliation was tantamount to directly touching its reverse scale. This caused the black python's heart to surge with endless anger. In the end, anger won over reason, causing it to recklessly rush out of the bottom of the lake. Scars of time. Just as the black python rushed out of the bottom of the lake, Yuhauran, who was already prepared, quickly raised his arm and pointed at the black python. With a soft shout, the black python that was fixed on the surface of the lake was quickly disintegrated into countless pieces of meat by the precept of Scars of Time. First, he used his divine telekinesis to collect the storage ring that the black python dropped and handed it to Thaling to organize. Then he stared closely at the precept of Scars of Time's evolution of the black python's life experience, checking the number and strength of high-level strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range. As an ordinary snake-type strange beast, the black python's life experience was very simple before the black dragon's bloodline in its body was activated. Therefore, it only took less than 5 minutes for the black python's life experience to be fully demonstrated. Thaling, we're in trouble, Yuhauran said solemnly as he looked at the black python's body that had reformed and directly smashed into the calm surface of the lake. I didn't expect that the quasi-venerable king strange beast that went through the body tribulation and mind tribulation in the Hungduan mountain range was actually just an ordinary gray fox. Thaling, who had diverted 1/3 of his attention, also saw the black python's life experience of the strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range. When he saw that the overlord of the entire Hungduan mountain range was actually a gray fox that had gone through the body tribulation and mind tribulation, he could not help but sigh. 1 second tribulation quasi-venerable king strange beast, 4 first tribulation quasi-venerable king strange beasts, and 9 quasi-venerable king strange beasts with the precept of perfection. No wonder they dare to take advantage of the opening of the green flame secret land to encircle and annihilate the human ancient martial art practitioners who entered the secret land. Originally, their strength was already so strong. Yuhauran was not very interested in the fact that the overlord of the strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range was just an ordinary gray fox. What he really cared about was the strength of the high-level strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range. There were 14 quasi-venerable king strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range. Even if the news of them encircling and annihilating the human ancient martial art practitioners leaked out, no force would dare to provoke or take revenge on the strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range. Yuhauran, don't worry. Hearing the worry in Yuhauran's voice, Thaling misunderstood that he was worried about breaking out of the encirclement and hurriedly comforted him. With the 4 symbols concentration formation that the second clone and I created, as well as the combined efforts of 4 quasi-martial exalts, although I can't say whether we can kill the second calamity gray fox, it should be no problem for us to easily break through. In response, Yuhauran only nodded and did not say anything else. In fact, he was not very worried about breaking out of the encirclement. Even if he did not use the 4 symbols concentration formation, he could still break out of the encirclement easily with the witch ancestor's bloodline inherited skill. At that moment, he was really worried about the attitude of the various forces in the southern region toward the Hungduan mountain range after breaking out of the encirclement. In the entire southern region, the only forces that could decide the life and death of the strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range were the great Emperor Qin's kingdom, as well as the Gu Liang family and the Rin family of the inherited skill. Emperor Qin, who was busy conquering the world, would definitely not spare any energy to deal with the strange beasts in the Hungduan mountain range. The Ren family, who kept a low profile and rarely interfered in the affairs of the southern region, would probably not show up either. As for the Guliang family, who was a fence-sitter, it was already good enough that they did not surrender on the spot. It was impossible to count on them to deal with the strange beasts in the Hengduan mountain range. If no force in the entire southern region took revenge on the strange beasts in the Hengduan mountain range, the Hengduan mountain range would be filled with confidence. Not only would the strange beasts in the Hengduan mountain range, or even the entire southern region, but it would also affect the will of the human ancient martial art practitioners. Chapter 9:15. Green Flame Secret Realm, Green Region. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran took a deep breath. He planned to return to Xianyang City directly after leaving the Hengduan mountain range. Then, he would explain the situation to Emperor Qin in detail and make him realize the seriousness of the strange beasts surrounding human cultivators in the Hengduan mountain range. After all, the entire southern region was Emperor Qin's territory. It was also his foundation for conquering the world in the future. He probably wouldn't want his territory to be occupied by a group of strange beasts in the future. After making up his mind, Yu Haoran put away his complicated thoughts. He planned to leave the lake and go to the border between the Green region and the Fire region to find Bai Li and the others. He wanted to see if the families behind them could send experts to help. However, at this moment, the tower consciousness in his mind suddenly reminded him, Yu Haoran, wait a moment. Faling, what's wrong? Yu Haoran stopped and asked, use the purple staff in your hand to force the other strange beast out from the bottom of the lake. Faling instructed with a hint of excitement. Faling, the strange beast at the bottom of the lake, is very likely a native of the Green region. It didn't offend me. Why should I provoke it? Yu Haoran refused unwillingly. After all, what he needed to consider now was how to successfully break out of the encirclement and how to persuade Emperor Qin to send troops to eliminate the strange beasts in the Hengduan mountain range. He had no interest in the strange beast at the bottom of the lake that posed no threat to him. Yu Haoran, when you see that strange beast, you'll know why I want you to provoke it. Faling continued to keep him in suspense. All right. Yu Haoran was also interested in the strange beast that could make Faling treat it so seriously. After nodding in agreement, he directly flew into the air above the lake. Afterwards, he used the purple staff in his hand that had lengthened and thickened to stir the entire lake. However, no matter how turbid the lake water became, the strange beast hiding at the bottom of the lake didn't move at all. This instead aroused Yu Haoran's fighting spirit. He recovered his 700-meter-tall wizard body and continued to enlarge and thicken the purple staff in his hand. Then, he began to stir the lake water with all his might. The huge stirring force created by the purple staff gradually formed a whirlpool on the surface of the lake. As the whirlpool rotated stronger and stronger, some of the rocks and precious refining materials at the bottom of the lake were swept out of the lake and fell to the shore. Woo! As the whirlpool rotated, the whirlpool water level and caused the lake water level, causing the lake a roar that sounded like a dragon and a tiger, that sounded like a tiger but wasn't a tiger. Accompanied by the roar, a 30-centimeter-long, translucent exotic beast with the exact shape of a real dragon appeared in the air through the vortex. Yu Haoran's voice trembled as he stared at the miniature version of the divine dragon, and he said in disbelief, could this be the legendary 10th son of the divine dragon, the Hui dragon? That's right. Faling asked with a smile after confirming that the shrunken dragon was indeed the legendary origin dragon. Yu Haoran, now you know why I asked you to force this strange beast out. Faling, according to ancient records, although the dragon god will have many descendants, there are only 9 descendants who can inherit the dragon god's bloodline. This is the origin of the dragon god's 9 sons. Yu Haoran swallowed his saliva as he nodded in reply to Faling. He was still in disbelief. As for the 10th son, it's a legend. Legend has it that the 10th son of the dragon god is called Dragon. Although it looks exactly like the dragon god, it doesn't have a trace of the dragon god's bloodline in its body. Because the dragon god is also known as the ancestral dragon, it will form the ancestral dragon's blood in its body through its own cultivation and advancement. The ancestral dragon's blood is close to the origin of heaven and earth, far more noble than the dragon god. Therefore, when the dragon god discovers that its offspring is the dragon god, it will immediately kill the dragon god to prevent the ancestral dragon that can rule the entire dragon clan. At this point, Howard couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I always thought this was just a legend that showed the strength of the dragon clan. Now, I didn't expect this legend to be true. A living dragon god has appeared before me. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.